Good morning, everyone. This is the Joint Standing Committee on the Judiciary, and we're going to begin our committee hearing this morning. We have a whole bunch of public hearings on bills. We have established a quorum. I want to let everybody know that legislators will be in and out of the meeting today because we're pulled in a lot of different directions for work sessions and bills. And some members may be disappearing quite shortly. We will go forward with our usual committee introductions before we start our bill hearings. And Representative Harnett, why don't you introduce yourself before heading off?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My name is Tom Harnett. I represent House District 83, which is the town of Farmingdale in the city of Gardner, where I reside. And I've got a bunch of public hearings today, so I will be in and out, and I'm about to head out now. Thank you, and have a good day, and welcome to all.
Thank you. Let's see, Senator Keim.
Morning, everyone. My name is Lisa Keim, and I'm proud to represent Senate District 18, which is Northern Oxford County and 2 communities in Androscoggin.
Thank you. Representative Babbage.
Yes, how do you do? Good morning. And my name is Christopher Babbage, and I feel very fortunate to represent House District 8, which is most of the town of Kennebunk.
Representative Moriarty.
Good morning, all. I'm Steve Moriarty, the representative from District 45, which is Cumberland and part of Gray.
And Representative Sheehan.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Erin Sheehan, and I'm proud to represent the good people of Biddeford's House District 12.
And Representative Thorne.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Jim Thorne. I am privileged to represent District 103, the good people of Carmel, Herman, and a portion of Etna up in beautiful Penobscot County.
Thank you. Representative Evangelos.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everybody. Jeffrey Evangelos, House District 91, and I reside in Friendship.
Thanks. And Representative Newell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. I am Rena Newell, and I am the Passamaquoddy Tribal Representative I've already said that, but I reside here in Sabayak in the beautiful down east there, Representative Thorne. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're joined this morning by our legislative analyst, Peggy Reinsch, and also our committee clerk, Susan Panett. Thank you. And the order of bills is going to be a little bit different than listed today to accommodate schedules. As I mentioned, we're all being pulled in a lot of different directions. We are going to start with LD number 810 at the request of Senator Bailey, who has to quickly move into another meeting. And let's see, I see if she's in the attendee space. Oh, there she is. Okay, and so we'll bring her. Soupy, could you please bring Senator Bailey onto the panel? And while Senator Bailey is joining us, I just want to let members of the public and committee members know that for these public hearings today, we just want to emphasize that the public hearing is a time for us to hear from the bill sponsors and members of the public who wish to provide us testimony regarding these bills. We are welcome, of course, to ask questions, but the debate on bills and expressing our own opinions is something that we reserve for the work session when we discuss and vote on bills. Let's see if Senator Ms. Panett, are you able to, could you please move Senator Bailey onto the panel or authorize me to make me a co-host? That's the lingo. Thanks. Here we go. Oh, and it's Friday. I'm forgetting a lot of things. In addition, bill sponsors have unlimited time to present their bills. Members of the public are asked to keep their remarks to 3 minutes, and then we'll have time for questions afterwards. And welcome, Senator Bailey, to your former committee. It's nice to see you today, and you can begin your presentation on LD 810 whenever you're ready.
Thank you. It's good to see you all. Good morning, Senator Carney and members of the Committee on Judiciary. My name is Donna Bailey, and I proudly serve the residents of Senate District 31. I'm before you today to present my bill LD 810, an act to allow remote notarization of documents in limited circumstances while preventing exploitation. The COVID-19 pandemic has created many challenges to how our society conducts business. Here in Maine, prior to the pandemic, notary services were exclusively an in-person transaction. Given the spread of this airborne virus, it was clear immediately that a form of remote notarization was going to be needed. Serving as the former House Chair of the Judiciary Committee, I was involved with many stakeholders, including the Secretary of State and Governor's Office, in drafting the Governor's Executive Order 37, signed April 8th, 2020. This executive order remains in place today. However, it will expire 30 days after the conclusion of the COVID-19 state of an emergency. While many businesses, organizations, and individuals that use notary services were pleased to have the Governor's executive order in place as an option during the pandemic, the system it created is admittedly imperfect and needs additional review and consideration. The term I've heard many people use is it's a little clunky. My experience serving on this committee and my background as a private attorney who practices both estate planning and real estate law, two areas requiring documents to be notarized the most, and former judge of probate encouraged me to sponsor this bill. I recognize that the Judiciary Committee will need time and space to carefully review the proposals around remote online notary services, and I wanted to make sure that the committee had a vehicle to do just that. As the committee works through this important issue, I would encourage you all to make sure that all the stakeholders are involved in the process. There will be several organizations that will represent business interests regarding notary laws, but it's important to me that the organizations representing our seniors and vulnerable populations are also involved in this discussion. Maine should absolutely develop and enact remote online notary services, but it cannot do so at the risk of putting vulnerable Mainers at risk. The final proposal for this modern day notary services must maintain protections of Maine's senior population. I thank the committee for their time and considerations. I encourage the committee to not rush the legislation and to take the time necessary to make sure we do it right. Assuming that point is reached, I would encourage the committee to bring remote online services to Maine permanently. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I do appreciate the chair's accommodating my schedule this morning. So it does mean perhaps that things are a little out of order. I understand my bill is a concept draft. And again, as I indicated, I know there are at least, I think there are 2 other bills regarding online notary services. And so again, I would like my bill to be used if necessary and desired as a vehicle to put forward whatever comes together as the stakeholders continue to meet. So I'm happy to answer any questions the committee might have.
Thank you so much, Senator Bailey. Senator Keim has a question for you. Go ahead, Senator Keim.
Thank you. Good morning, Senator Bailey. I was just wondering if part of this consideration, if you're wanting us to look at the qualifications to be a notary or somehow change who can be a notary.
I think that Representative Dudera's bill that you're going to be hearing this morning as well, which is the Model Act, does have provisions in it for special training for online notaries and special qualifications. So yes, I think that is part of what is being looked at. And I know that the Secretary of State's office is also involved in that and concerned about that.
Thank you.
Representative Moriarty?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope I'm not out of line here. I just want to point out that this is one of 3 bills addressing the same issue in rather similar fashion that we'll hear this morning. We all received an email from Peggy 45 minutes ago. And if I'm not out of order, it may be useful if Peggy were to just summarize what the status of the 3 bills is at this point.
So that's a great suggestion, Representative Moriarty. However, I think we'll let the bill sponsors do that. They're here, they're excited to present their testimony to us. And I think as Senator Bailey pointed out, that her bill is really a vehicle for future action. But I think the substance of the proposed amendment is, I know that the bill sponsor and others who have been working on it were in touch with me, and they're ready and excited to present it to us today. Okay. Thank you. Representative Thorne?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I always have to check my Sophie mic to make sure I'm unmuted. Let's see. What I'd like to do, Senator Bailey, kind of piggyback off what Senator Keim mentioned. Last year, I became a notary public, and I was pretty amazed at how easy I was able to do it without regard to any type of background check or anything. Went through the process, did it mostly online. And my question to you is, in the summary of the bill, it says this bill would examine the experiences of notary public who have been allowed to remotely notarize documents pursuant to the governor's executive orders. Is that limited amount of people, or pretty much anybody who applies for that was able to do that or is able to do that?
Yeah, the executive order applied to all notaries. So pursuant to the executive order, it would be anyone who qualified as a notary, assuming, of course, that they followed the procedures set forth in the executive order.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Representative Thorne. And at this point, I'm going to ask Representative Libby, who has just joined us from the attendee list. She got stuck over there for a little bit, to introduce herself. And as she's doing that, members who are in the attendee space, I would ask, if you're here to talk about remote notary, that you wait until we hear the subsequent bills on remote notarization. If that is an obstacle for you and you'd really like to testify on 810, please raise your hand and we'll call on you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize. I am on my phone and so I am listening, but I don't have video. This is Representative Laura Libby. I represent District 64, which is part of Auburn and all of Minot. And I am glad to be joining you today. And I apologize for not having video at the moment. I will try to rectify that hopefully later this morning.
Thank you so much, Representative Libby. We're glad you're here. All right, and I'm not seeing anybody in the attendee space with an electronic hand raised. And so with that, we will conclude the public hearing on LD 810 with thanks to Senator Bailey for bringing it forward and giving us a vehicle to do additional work on this bill.
Thank you.
And then for those members of the committee on the panel and also those who are in the attendee space, the bill order today has changed a little bit to accommodate various schedules. It's posted in the chat, and our next bill is LD 788. And that is an act to align the pre-conviction and post-conviction discretionary deductions for time served, and that is being presented by Representative Evangelos, our colleague on the Judiciary Committee. Representative Evangelos, you can proceed whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Senator Carney. This should be an easy fix-it bill. Probably appreciate that. Good morning, Senator Carney, Representative Harnett, and other distinguished members of the Judiciary Committee. I am Representative Jeffrey Evangelos from Friendship, and I represent House District 91. I am speaking today in support of LD 788, an act to align the pre-conviction and post-conviction discretionary deductions for time served. As the summary indicates, this bill makes the discretionary deduction for time served the same for pre-conviction and post-conviction time served. The new deduction applies to an individual who commits a crime on or after August 1st, 2021. The printed version of the summary in paragraph section 5-4-A stating the year 2020 is a drafting error. This bill is a simple fix. People awaiting trial who cannot make bail and who reside in a corrections facility awaiting trial now currently can only earn 2 days off their sentence for good conduct. If that person is found guilty and sentenced to jail or prison, they receive generally 4 days off their sentence once they arrive at the correctional facility. This disparity puts the accused in an unfair advantage while awaiting trial and places the prosecution with an unfair, I'll repeat that. This disparity puts the accused at an unfair disadvantage while awaiting trial and places the prosecution with an unfair advantage over the accused. In reality, this disparity discourages an innocent plea and encourages a guilty one, i.e., and to quote, "I might as well get it over with. The sooner I do, the sooner I'll earn better good time deductions." All this bill does is level the playing field so that the good time calculations is consistent and equal, whether you are awaiting trial or serving time after conviction. Thank you for your consideration. I'll be happy to answer questions. I see that Attorney Jeremy Pratt from MACDL has joined us, and he can explain additional technical details. I'm willing to answer your questions as well. That's it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Representative Evangelos, and we'll call Mr. Pratt second. I didn't see any legislators sign up to testify. But let's do some questions. Representative Babbage, go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. And Representative, thank you for this. Do you have any knowledge as to how this disparity occurred? In other words, is there a history as to why there is a disparity?
I could only give you a guess. Mr. Pratt will do better, but I assume that it came out of the revised criminal code in the 70s and 80s, which is a pretty unbalanced criminal code, and we're trying to address it with some of our reforms. But that's my guess. But I'll let him tackle it.
Great, thank you.
Committee members, any other questions for our colleague, Representative Evangelos? I'm not seeing any. Thank you so much for the clear presentation of this bill and for bringing it forward today, Representative.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll start to bring in people from the attendee list who would like to speak in favor of this legislation. And we'll start with Jeremy Pratt. And for those who are a little unfamiliar with the process, when you transition from the attendee part of the meeting to the panel, you'll feel like you've been disconnected briefly, but then you'll reconnect on the panel. Welcome, Mr. Pratt. You can begin your testimony whenever you're ready.
Good morning and thank you. Senator Carney, Representative Harnett, members of the Judiciary Committee. I want to begin by thanking Representative Evangelos for bringing forth this important bill. MACDL, my name is Jeremy Pratt. I am the Vice President of the Maine Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. MACDL supports LD 788. Individuals in custody can reduce their sentence for good behavior. This is commonly called good time deductions. Currently, the law is you earn one amount of good time deduction if you are incarcerated on a pre-conviction basis and another amount of good time deduction if you are incarcerated post-conviction. You earn more good credit when you are post-conviction. Post-conviction means you have been found guilty and have been sentenced. LD 7088 will make the pre and post-conviction good time deductions the same. In other words, there will be no distinction if you are being held in custody, pre-conviction, or post-conviction. I think it's worth noting that that is what is currently done at the federal system. There is no distinction pre or post-conviction. There is no rational justification on why good credit deduction should be different for pre and post-conviction individuals. The policy now incentivizes people incarcerated to plead guilty if they are awaiting trial. During the pandemic, the wait time for a trial has dramatically increased. The incentive runs the risk of innocent people pleading guilty to crimes they did not commit. Good credit encourages inmates to behave and to self-improve. This adds to the safety of other inmates. It adds to the safety of jail and prison staff. Additionally, it will reduce the burden on staff to keep track and calculate the good credit deductions because the formula will be the same for pre and post conviction. MACDEL hopes this committee will support LD 7088 with an ought to pass recommendation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that this committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pratt. Could you start, please, by answering Representative Babbage's question about how the difference in standards came to be, if you're aware of that?
Unfortunately, I do not know the answer. I think Representative Evangelos gave a very educated guess that I would assume is the case, but I'm happy to do research into that and provide that either to Representative Evangelos or another member of the committee for review during the work session, but I'm happy to dig into that and find that out between now and then.
Thank you. We'd appreciate that. And if you could provide it to our analyst, Peggy Reinsch, that would be really helpful. Then she can include it in the bill analysis.
Of course.
Thanks. Committee members, are there additional questions for Mr. Pratt? Not seeing any. We appreciate you being here this morning, Mr. Pratt.
Thank you very much.
I'm now looking to those in the attendee part of the meeting. Anyone who's here to speak in support of LD 788, please raise your electronic hand. We'll be joined by Jan Collins. Welcome back to the Judiciary Committee, Ms. Collins. You can begin your testimony whenever you're ready.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. Greetings, Senator Carney, Representative Harnett in absentia, and honorable members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Jan Collins. I am Assistant Director of Maine Prisoner Advocacy Coalition, and I'm here to support LD 788, an act to align the pre-conviction and post-conviction discretionary deductions for time served. MPAC's mission is to support Maine's incarcerated citizens, their families and friends in their struggle with Maine's criminal justice system. Our purpose is to reduce Maine's use of incarceration by creating a criminal justice system that is ethical, humane, and restorative in nature. We thank Representative Evangelos for bringing this bill forward to make things fairer. And you have heard about the extent of what one can say about a bill that is this simple. Discretionary deductions, known colloquially as good time, are used throughout Maine's jails and prisons to encourage compliance and pro-social behavior. It is a carrot, a reward for following the rules. LD 788 is a simple bill. If an inmate observes the rules and behaves well before, during trial, and after, the reward should be the same as good behavior after the trial. We only wish that the bill could be applied retroactively. Thank you for your support of fairness and consistency.
Thank you very much, Ms. Collins. Committee members, are there questions for Ms. Collins? Not seeing any. Appreciate you being here. And we've been joined by the next person who wishes to speak in favor of this legislation, and that's Andrea Mancuso. And Ms. Mancuso, you can begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning, Senator Carney, members of the committee. My name is Andrea Mancuso, and I'm here today on behalf of the Maine Coalition to End Domestic Violence in support of LD 788. Good time calculations should be equal, whether you're awaiting trial or serving time post-convictions, for all the reasons that you've heard from the previous speakers. Whether it be 2 days or 4 days a month, this difference of a handful of days is not going to be the difference for whether someone is motivated to change their behavior. That said, we would like to encourage the committee to take this opportunity to also consider the importance of accurate victim notification at the time of sentencing, because these fewer days each month over several pretrial months, while reflective of good public policy, could very well impact the choices a victim makes about planning around their safety needs post-sentencing. Very few victims of crime have an innate understanding of how good time works. So if not properly informed about the accumulation of this time, many victims would be caught unaware of how much earlier a defendant who has accumulated an appreciable amount would be released ahead of what the full imposed sentence is. For example, suppose a defendant is incarcerated for 3 months pretrial and accumulates the full 12 days. The defendant is sentenced on May 1st to a sentence of 30 days. The victim is told about the 30-day sentence, but not the good time accumulation, which is, I think, what happens the substantial majority of the time, and understandably then assumes that means they have approximately 4 weeks to prepare for the defendant's release. In truth, with the accumulation of pretrial good time and the good time that might be accumulated post-conviction, the victim would actually have roughly 2 weeks, so half the time of the imposed sentence. So we'd encourage the committee to consider making an amendment to the bill that would require the state at the time of sentencing to both obtain the information from the relevant county jail about the amount of good time the defendant has accumulated, and to make a good faith effort to notify the victim of this information. Without information about the accumulated pretrial good time, the sentencing information a victim receives from the state is inaccurate and misleading, and it will lead more victims to more victims scrambling for safety upon receiving that call from the county jail that the person who has abused them is being released that day, many days before they were expecting. To be clear, problems around victim notification and notification with accurate information are not new. These problems are long-standing and they compromise victim safety now. But as you rightly align pretrial good time with that available post-conviction, we think this committee has an opportunity to also take an important step, and a simple one, to ensure that victim safety is better attended to at the same time. So thank you for the opportunity to share this perspective with you as you consider this bill, and we're happy to be a resource as the conversation moves forward.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mancuso. Do you have a prepared amendment, a written amendment?
I don't this morning, but it would be very simple to do, and I'm happy to send something to Peggy.
That would be really helpful. And if you could also speak with Representative Evangelos as you're working on that. We're kind of in a situation where if we don't have any proposed amendments to actually look at the work session, in fact, ahead of the work session, it's hard for us to integrate the new information. So we appreciate you taking care of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Committee members, are there any questions for Ms. Mancuso? I'm not Representative Evangelos. And as the bill sponsor, I think you can ask clarifying questions. So go ahead. Excuse me, go ahead with your clarifying question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That would be a good idea that Representative Mancuso, I just elected you. Run for something bigger. But anyways, yeah, I would be very supportive of that idea and would look forward to seeing the amendment. And that's all I have to say.
Great. Thank you very much, Representative Evangelos. I'm happy to get you something by this afternoon.
Sure. Just if you ship it off to Peggy, then we'll collaborate that way. Thanks.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you both. And let me just check and see. I'm not seeing anybody else with a raised hand, but there may be, let's see. Okay, so I'm turning to the attendee space. Is there anybody who would like to testify on 788? In support of 788? I'm not seeing any hands. Anyone in opposition to 788? Also no hands. And then finally, is there anyone who wishes to speak neither for nor against LD 788. I also am not seeing any hands. So with that, we'll close the public hearing on LD 788. Thank you to the bill sponsor, Representative Evangelos. And there's been some questions. I think I confused some people by taking Representative Bailey's bill out of, Senator Bailey's bill out of order. So we are going to shortly get to 3 other bills related to remote notarization. And for those who are in the attendee space and wished to testify on Senator Bailey's bill, we'll be getting to LD 1399 in just 2 bills. And I would ask that you if you can be patient and then raise your hands when we get to that bill. Much appreciated. So now we'll move on to our next public hearing, and that is on LD 1403, an act to protect Maine businesses, nonprofits, educational institutions, and municipalities during the COVID-19 pandemic. That is being presented by Representative Dillingham. I believe she is here, and I will bring her over to the panel in just a moment. Welcome, Representative Dillingham, to the Judiciary Committee. You have a very lovely array of flowers behind you. Thanks for brightening up our day.
Thank you. I try to capture my blooms out in the yard and thought that would look very nice rather than the snowy scene I used to have behind me.
It's beautiful.
Wonderful.
Well, welcome to the Judiciary Committee, and you can begin your presentation on LD 1403 when you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning, Senator Carney, Representative Hartnett, and members of the Judiciary Committee. I'm Kathleen Dillingham, and I represent House District 72, which is comprised of the towns of Mechanic Falls, Otisfield, and Oxford. I'm here to present LD 1403, an act to protect Maine businesses, nonprofits, educational institutions, and municipalities during the COVID-19 pandemic. We are all aware the last year has taken a great economic toll on our employers. I've submitted this bill with the help and guidance of those listed in the title. The language in this proposal is similar to proposals that are already in place or are currently working their way through legislatures in 31 states. All done so with the intent to limit further economic hardships our employers could suffer through unwarranted litigation as they lead our state through economic recovery. This proposal seeks to create limitations on liability for Maine's businesses, nonprofits, educational institutions, and municipalities in lawsuits alleging personal liability due to exposure to coronavirus, so long as all applicable government standards and guidance related COVID-19 were followed. This does not seek to give immunity to any of those entities that did not follow rules and guidelines put in place to protect public health, but rather create a threshold to dissuade possible frivolous lawsuits that have no basis in wrongdoing on the part of the employer or business owner to hold them liable for any possible COVID-19 exposure. This bill is also not intended to change any existing workers' compensation law, and I will leave it to the committee to make any amendments to the language you feel are necessary to ensure that is clear. I also anticipate there will be some language suggested from the nonprofit sector to make it clear this bill should apply to the beginning of the pandemic, and I fully support this additional language. There are already more than 270 cases nationwide seeking to hold businesses, nonprofits, schools, and towns responsible for COVID-19. While some testifying may think that that number is small, I am sure those facing the litigation, if unwarranted, are not focused on how many suits have been filed, but rather only concerned with the suit they are facing. And I want to be very clear, in the instances where these cases can cite misconduct and malfeasance on part of the business owner, then certainly there is cause for litigation, and this proposal does not seek to provide a full shield or shield from liability any employer or business owner that has flouted any regulations and guidance. The intent of this proposal is not to prevent lawsuits in those cases. Maine's employers have carried a great burden to survive the last year and to provide the essential services we have all and do currently rely on. They have invested thousands of dollars and collectively lost millions to do whatever was required of them by the state to ensure compliance with safety protocols to help ensure the health of citizens while still providing services. I ask that we provide them with assurance that they will be protected against unwarranted and costly lawsuits that could jeopardize their continued survival. I thank you for your time, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions I can, but I believe those testifying from the industry after me would be better suited to do so. Thank you for your time again, and I ask that you support this bill. It's a very important piece of legislation.
Thank you so much, Representative Dillingham. Committee members, are there any questions for Representative Dillingham? Not seeing any. I'm sure we'll have questions for those who follow. Thank you so much. And you're welcome to remain on the panel for the rest of the public hearing.
Wonderful. Have a great day, all.
Thank you.
Take care.
And let's see, I'm going to ask those who are in the attendee portion of the meeting who wish to testify in support of this legislation, LD 1403, to please raise your electronic hand and leave it raised until after you've given your testimony. It's the easiest way for us to keep track of you. And I would just let everybody know that we do have about 15 or so people signed up to testify on this bill. And so I'm going to run the 3-minute clock and be very consistent in stopping people after 3 minutes, because we've got a number of bills to hear this morning, and we want to make sure that everybody who has set aside their day to testify gets to testify on the bills. And we'll be joined by Rory Whalen. Welcome, Mr. Whalen, to the Judiciary Committee. You can unmute yourself and proceed with your 3 minutes of testimony whenever you're ready.
Good morning, and thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, and thank you to the sponsor for her thoughtful articulation of the merits of this provision, this proposal. I will be brief. I will submit written testimony. My name is Rory Whalen. I am the Regional Vice President of Government Affairs for the National Association of Mutual Insurance Companies, the largest association representing the P&C industry. As we know, COVID-19 has tested Americans' resiliency unlike any other crisis in recent memory. Americans have rallied to protect and support one another in many, many ways. Particularly our frontline workers, including healthcare professionals, first responders, government employees, and essential workers, have been appropriately recognized for their service and their sacrifice. Likewise, professionals, businesses, institutions, and non-for-profits have also significantly contributed to the battle against this deadly virus by keeping Americans employed and ensuring safe access to critical goods and services. That is why this legislation to provide immunity from civil liability to individuals and entities that have operated, and I think this is an important point, that have operated in good faith pursuant to health and safety guidelines during the pandemic, that this is not only fair and just, but it is smart public policy for the state of Maine. We should be reminded that during this past year, as communicable disease experts gained a better understanding of this virus, public health guidelines and safety protocols were modified numerous times and with significant variations. And only this past week, we are seeing CDC guidance change once again, which is normal in the course of a pandemic like this. Therefore, businesses that went to great effort and considerable expense to adhere to these changing guidelines should not face the threat of litigation. To be clear, and I think the sponsor was very clear about this, but I will reiterate, this bill does not provide immunity for reckless actions, gross negligence, or willful misconduct. This legislation simply recognizes that businesses and other entities that did the right thing and comported with these fluid directives merit protection from unfair lawsuits. And in closing, I believe this is a great opportunity for Maine to lead where Washington has lagged. The Congress has endeavored to enact similar federal legislation for over a year without any success or prospects for passage. More than 30 states have enacted similar laws providing these liability protections, and many are pending in neighboring states. Approval of this bill would memorialize in statute that Maine will support business investment and job creation by granting legal protections to responsible businesses and other entities. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Committee members, are there any questions? Not seeing any. Thank you once again, and thanks for submitting your testimony in writing. That helps all of us.
Will do. Thank you very much.
We'll be joined by Brian Park, and while he's coming over, Senator Sanborn, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Senator Carney. My name is Heather Sanborn. I represent Senate District 28, which is half of Portland and half of Westbrook, and I apologize for being late. I was in some other meetings.
Thank you. And Mr. Park, welcome to the Judiciary Committee. Happy to see you this morning, and you can start your 3-minute testimony whenever you're ready.
Okay, good morning, Senator Carney, Representative Hartnett, members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Brian Park. I'm the President and CEO of the Maine Motor Transport Association and a resident of Brunswick. Our association is comprised of almost 1,600 member companies whose employees make up a large portion of the 32,000 people who make their living in the trucking industry in Maine. I've submitted written testimony in support for LD 1403 and I'd like to thank the sponsors for bringing this bill forward. Before the pandemic started, while it was ramping up early last year, and when we were all working from home and were sheltering in place, through today when vaccines are being distributed all over this country, trucking never stopped. Our members delivered everything America needed: medical necessities, groceries, internet orders, and yes, even toilet paper, every hour of every day in order to keep our country supplied. Truck drivers, diesel technicians, warehouse personnel, and logistics professionals all showed up ready to meet the challenges of the day. Our trucking companies and their shipper customers, like other essential industries, worked hard to develop and implement their plans to protect their employees and the public. We were guided by the advice of the scientific and medical communities as communicated through local, state, and federal governments. To nobody's surprise, information was not always straightforward or timely, but our members reached out to us almost every single day with a strong desire to keep their people safe. The way many of our members saw things, everyone had a role to play to keep our country safe and fed. Ours was to be out there making critical pickups and deliveries during the pandemic. Concerns about employee safety were handled cautiously because our industry needed to be there to deliver. In turn, we think it's abundantly reasonable to implement common sense liability protections like the ones described in LD 1403. None of this is to suggest that we believe overt negligence should exempt an employer from liability if they are reckless, and we do not support exempting workers' compensation benefits. But rather, we believe exempting an employer who has implemented sensible precautions in good faith would encourage similar selfless and altruistic behaviors in the future. Thank you for your consideration and for allowing me to submit both written and oral testimony. I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee might have today or at the work session.
Thank you very much, and thanks for being so efficient with your testimony. Committee members, are there any questions for Mr. Park? Do you have a question, Senator Kine? Go ahead.
Thank you. I was looking for my electronic hand. Thank you for being here, Mr. Park. I was wondering if you know if there are issues with lawsuits right now in your industry.
I don't know of any currently, no.
Okay, thank you.
This is more to be proactive.
Mm-hmm. Understood. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Any other questions for Mr. Park? Not seeing any. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And you're welcome. And next we have Linda. Linda, I didn't catch your name. Thank you. And thank you so much for introducing yourself. Welcome, and you can begin your 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
Good morning, Senator Carney, Representative Harnett, and members of the committee. My name is Linda Caprera. I represent the Maine State Chamber of Commerce, and I am a resident of Winthrop. We are here in strong support of LD 1403, and we want to thank Representative Dillingham for putting this bill in. The COVID-19 pandemic is unlike anything the country has ever faced in over 100 years. During this time, people from around the state came together to try to help one another function and endure during this trying time. LD 1403 attempts to protect those entities, such as businesses, municipalities, nonprofits, and educational institutions who attempted to do the right thing by their employees, customers, and third parties, while maintaining operations that ultimately benefited the public. LD 1403 would provide legal liability protections for these entities for exposure from COVID-19. We feel this legislation is very similar to the Good Samaritan laws that are currently on the books under Title 14, Chapter 7, Section 164, immunity from civil liability. Those laws protect people who literally step up to the plate in an attempt to save a person's life. They cannot be held legally responsible if inadvertently the person dies in the process. You may ask, why would this law not apply then across the books to other situations? The answer is, this pandemic is unique. During the pandemic, numerous companies from around the state interrupted their operations to produce life-saving personal protective equipment that was used by healthcare workers, companies, municipalities, educational institutions, and many other businesses to protect, provide and protect those workers and those customers. We are not suggesting nor agree that bad actors should be protected. In fact, in the bill, liability protections do not apply to situations where there is gross negligence, willful misconduct, or intentional criminal conduct or infliction of harm. But rather, we firmly believe that businesses who made every attempt to follow state and federal guidelines and made a good faith effort to do the right thing during this trying time should have protections in place against the threat of lawsuits. For example, if a patron of a restaurant or bar claimed they got COVID from frequenting the establishment, it would be up to the owner to defend themselves against the lawsuit, which can be very costly and for which liability insurance will most likely not cover. That means the owner could be personally responsible for the claim, potentially. We have heard that there's currently over 31 other states that have passed or are in the process of considering similar legislation like this due to the fact that the federal government failed to take any action on this issue. In addition, we've also heard there's over 200 lawsuits that have been filed across the country. Again, we feel that LD 1403 is necessary and will protect those entities who have tried to do the right thing during this devastating pandemic. And we urge you to vote yes on LD 1403. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, and we will be available for work session. And I just want to remind the committee, we do not feel that this should apply to workers' comp claims as well. So.
Thank you very much, Ms. Caprera. You have a lovely last name. Thank you. Committee members, are there any questions? I'm not seeing any. We appreciate your testimony. And did you provide the written testimony to us as well?
I'm going to provide that when I leave here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And next, we're joined by Allison Dragg, and you can begin your testimony whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much, Senator Carney and members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Allison Perrin-Dragg, and I am the Government Relations Director for the American Heart American Stroke Association, which is the nation's oldest and largest voluntary organization dedicated to fighting heart disease and stroke. And our mission is to be a relentless force for a world of longer, healthier lives. We are here testifying in support of LD 1403. The AHA supports COVID-19 related liability protection for nonprofits that are complying with state and local guidelines. As you consider COVID-19 liability protections, the AHA is asking that any liability protections include nonprofit organizations, their employees, volunteers, and attendees at their events, provided for our own facilities as well as other venues. We also ask that it's retroactive to the beginning of COVID-19 and extends past the declared public health emergency. Liability protection should not be extended to shield gross negligence or willful misconduct and bad actors who are not operating safely and in compliance with state and local guidelines. However, the threat of frivolous lawsuits is a real concern, and nonprofits like the AHA who are doing the right thing and following and maintaining safety guidelines need protection to safely maintain businesses. Nonprofits have a critical economic impact in the United States. We employ 12.3 million people nationally, and our industry employs more people than other large industries such as construction, transportation, and finance. Nonprofits have an even broader impact through creating economic activity and jobs in the communities across the country and provide vital services such as programs for people in need and life-saving research. COVID-19 has had devastating impact on nonprofit organizations and especially nonprofits as the AHA that rely on charitable donations that are gathered in-person events to continue our life-saving mission, and COVID-19 liability protections are necessary to guard against the concern of frivolous lawsuit. We have talked to the sponsor, and as we mentioned, one thing we'd like to see is that retroactive liability to the start of the pandemic, and I know she's willing to work with us. We're happy to work with the committee on any language around that. And we did submit written testimony with the American Cancer Society as well, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Committee members, are there any questions? I am not seeing any. I would just note that because of where we are in the legislative session and bills are coming at us at a very fast pace, if you could work on any proposed amendment language and get it to our committee clerk, please, our committee analyst, please.
Yeah, we send that through the sponsor, but I'm happy to send it as well. So we did give it to the sponsor, but we can follow up as well.
Yeah, that would be very helpful, because if we can see it before the work session, we'll be able to act more in a more informed way. Thank you.
Perfect. Yes, thank you so much.
All right, and next we'll hear from Greg Dougal, and he is coming over to the panel. Yep, I'm concerned that I lost him in cyberspace. Oh, there he is.
Senator Carney, how are you today?
Hi, welcome.
Thank you very much. Senator Carney and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Judiciary, my name is Greg Dougal, and I am here today representing Hospitality Maine and our over 1,000 restaurant and lodging members to speak in support of LD 1403. We would like to thank the sponsor and co-sponsors of this bill, all of these segments of for-profit and nonprofit industries that have suffered greatly, and one could argue that hospitality businesses were right at the top of that list. Many lodging properties remained open throughout the early days of the pandemic, catering to essential workers, the homeless, individuals who tested positive for COVID, and first responders, most for severely reduced room rates, and many of those were for free. It was the right thing to do. Hospitality Maine even helped set up a relationship between the Y and Portland and some of our hotel members to house populations of people who lived there when outbreaks would arise at the Y. For all that good work that our hospitality members contributed to society, they could very easily be potentially sued for these activities. We all could argue that were noble and needed. The pandemic is still with us, so the statute of limitations may extend into 2024, and these businesses could potentially find themselves in court after trying to do the right things by their employees and customers. As many others have said and will say, we are in complete agreement that this should not apply to those businesses that were not in compliance with the COVID checklist and negligently put people in harm's way. This would apply only to those businesses that did their best to adhere to established protocols. LD 1403 would provide liability protections for those entities from exposure to COVID-19 related lawsuits, including restaurants, which we also represent. Our restaurants provided drive-through service for healthcare workers and first responders during the pandemic, and independent family restaurants that continued to provide pickup and delivery at their own risk. These businesses were required to adhere to all of the checklists pertaining to restaurants and then had to pivot when indoor seating was gradually allowed. They continued to operate their businesses with never-ending changing landscape of new checklists and new rules presented by the state CDC and DECD. They had no choice. They either had to try to comply or risk financial ruin. So let's give these brave business people a degree of protection and a good night's sleep for not holding them liable for things outside of their control, a pandemic, as they remained open. Several states have, as you have heard, have passed or are considering similar legislation. And we feel that we would like to see the same thing obviously occur here in the state of Maine. So I do have my written testimony teed up. I will hit the send button, or submit, I should say, as soon as I am done here. Thank you very much, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dougal. And I do see that there are a couple of questions. Representative Thorne, your hand was up first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome, Mr. Dougal. Are you aware of how many businesses within the hospitality industry, which I assume would encompass restaurants, hotels, motels, how many were affected with lawsuits since the pandemic began?
I don't know of any here in Maine. I know that this has occurred in other states, but as far as I know, There's been nobody that's been sued. There were some people that were found to be not in compliance, and I believe there have been lawsuits related to that. But I know of none currently that would be specific to what this bill would protect.
Thank
Good,
you.
how are
Thank you,
you?
Madam.
So I think to Allison, and she said you folks sent me the
Somebody's,
language,
let me
and
see.
I'm wondering.
There we go. I think she was inadvertently unmuted. Senator Keim, did you have a question?
Representative Thorne asked it. Thank you.
Okay. And then Mr. Dougal, I just wanted to ask you, I know that you and I spent a lot of time in labor and housing in the 129th. There has been some mention of the interaction between this proposal and workers' compensation. And I don't know if you similarly feel that workers' compensation claims should not be impacted by the proposed immunity in this legislation. Can you tell us how you feel about that?
It won't take long. We totally agree with you. And I believe Mr. Park mentioned that earlier in his testimony, and we are in agreement with that.
Okay, then I am going to tap into your good nature and your experience in the Labor Committee. Can you work with a group to propose an amendment to this bill that would address the interaction with the workers' compensation statute? Because that's something that we as a committee may not have the time and ability to get to.
Yes, I mean, obviously the Maine State Chamber has galvanized this group of people to get together to make sure. So I will speak with Linda and Brian Park and see what we can come up with. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, and I don't see any more questions, and we've been joined by Victoria Wallach. And so Ms. Wallach, you can start your 3-minute testimony whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Senator Carney and members of the Judiciary Committee, I am Victoria Wallach, Communications and Government Relations Director for Maine School Management Association, representing the Maine Superintendents Association and the Maine School Boards Association in support of LD 1403. Our associations support this bill and the liability protection it offers public schools. The issue started to surface nationally last year when concerns were raised that traditional liability insurance would not adequately cover school districts if they were sued over COVID-19 exposure. Those concerns proved to be warranted. The National School Boards Association and National School Superintendents Association urged Congress to take action to protect public schools from a potential wave of lawsuits around COVID exposure. Those lawsuits, they cautioned, would disrupt the reopening of schools and entangle school districts in litigation when our schools are and should remain focused on getting students safely back into the classroom. In an eloquent plea, those national groups wrote, "Our nation's schools are a large part of the community's critical infrastructure. They are a key contributor to economic growth and GDP. As the federal government continues to assist states and local governments with COVID recovery, liability protections during the pandemic will help our schools reopen safely, implement the necessary protocols to protect our students and staff, and mitigate additional losses." Congress did not act, as was mentioned, and then that request has now come down to the state legislative level. We appreciate the bill that the sponsor has put in and brought forward, and the protections it will afford public schools in Maine. Our focus and funding need to be on educating students without the distraction and cost of fighting liability suits. And I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wallach. Committee members, are there any questions from Ms. Wallach? Not seeing any. I do have a question for you, which is, I'm curious as to why claims against public schools would not be immune under the terms of the Maine Tort Claims Act.
Our insurer has told us that we are liable, and there is no insurance for it. So that we are acting on the recommendation of our insurance company.
Thank you very much.
And I will try to get additional information on the Tort Act for the work session. I will ask.
Thank you. That would be helpful.
Thank you.
All right. I'm not seeing any other questions. And so we'll bring in our next speaker, Brian Moran. And Representative Reckitt, you've just joined us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Lois Reckitt, and I represent District 31, which is the ocean end of South Portland. I apologize for my tardiness this morning. Thank you.
Welcome, Representative. And I actually think that Mr. Picard is our next presenter, and then we'll go to you, Mr. Moran. Welcome, Mr. Picard. You can begin when you're ready.
Good morning, Senator Carney and members of the Judiciary Committee. I am Curtis Picard, President and CEO of the Retail Association of Maine. I'm a resident of Topsom, and we have more than 350 members statewide and represent retailers of all sizes. Maine's retailers employ more than 85,000 Mainers, and I'm here today to testify in support of LD 1403. It's been a long 14 months for everyone. No one anticipated the impact this pandemic would have on everyone. For retailers, the impact has been dramatic. Retailers, if you were lucky enough to be considered essential in the early days, were allowed limited operations. Others were shut down completely. When we reached a point where retail could reopen, we all learned about 6 feet of distance, capacity limits, frequent sanitation, plexiglass, contactless transactions, curbside pickup, and of course, masking up. Retailers were on the front lines of dealing with angry customers who were frustrated with changing and sometimes conflicting guidelines. It became so bad that our association, in partnership with the Maine Grocers and Food Producers Association and the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce, launched a statewide Let's Be Kind campaign to remind customers that businesses are doing everything they can to keep their employees and customers safe, and that a little compassion and understanding go a long way. Throughout it all, retailers rose to the occasion to help us get us to where we are today. And while we're not yet through the pandemic, this April is looking far better than last April. LD 1403 is truly a simple bill. It will protect businesses, municipalities, and educational institutions from lawsuits alleging personal liability due to exposure from the coronavirus. This does not provide blanket immunity to all businesses. Those businesses that refuse to enforce the mask requirement, for example, would not be protected under this bill. However, the thousands of businesses who did follow the guidelines should be afforded some measure of protection if they were doing everything our governmental leaders and health experts have been mandating throughout the pandemic. Utah passed a similar bill in April of 2020. And as Representative Dillingham noted, 31 other states have passed or are considering similar legislation. Maine businesses deserve similar protections. Please vote ought to pass on LD 1403, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Picard. And I see that Representative Thorne has a question for you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome, Mr. Picard. Thank you for coming today and providing your testimony. And I would ask you the same question I asked Mr. Dougal. How many retail association businesses were affected with lawsuits since the beginning of the pandemic?
We have not heard of any yet in Maine, but we're also not yet through the pandemic. So as other folks have testified, this is kind of being preemptive, understanding that this is a once in a generation type of situation. And after the year we've been through, we're looking for some additional protection and assurances.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. I'm not seeing any other questions for you, Mr. Picard. So we thank you for your testimony today. And next we'll have Brian Moran. And Mr. Moran, you can begin your 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Brian Moran. I'm Director of Government Affairs for the New England Convenience Store and Energy Marketers Association. We represent convenience stores and gas retailers and the transportation fuel distributors. In Maine, there are approximately 1,000 plus convenience stores and their members, and they employ over 16,000 people. I want to thank Representative Dillingham for her sponsorship of this bill and all the co-sponsors, and we are pleased to be able to speak in support of LD 1403. As the pandemic began, widespread closures, particularly in retail, were occurring, and our industry was designated as essential. often providing services, essential services to people, and be able to get goods, whatever they needed. And our members, I guess the way to put it is, they could have turned and run, or closed, but they decided to stay open, just as they always do. We met the challenge of the changing health protocols. We monitored the many governor and Governor Mills, as well as the state health officials and CDC guidelines that were changing and coming out every day, and we communicated that information to our members. That wasn't inexpensive, but it was absolutely necessary, so we can protect our employees and protect our customers. This, I think, next point I'd like to make, and I don't think anybody else has made it yet, concerns as the pandemic wore on and you could start to see elevated rates of transmission occurring. Yet when you went and listened to the governor and the state public health officials, they would say, look, based on contact tracing metrics, the concern wasn't business compliance. It was personal socialization. And so to me, I think that's a great point to raise, particularly as it relates to the need to draw the line between workers' compensation and this bill. I guess, just kind of summarizing as a bottom line, not to go too far and repeat what everybody else has been saying. The bottom line is we had Maine's back, and we're asking you to keep our back, and by passing this legislation. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Moran is how you pronounce your last name, right?
Correct.
Like the mountain in Wyoming.
There you go.
Thank you. Committee members, are there any questions for Mr. Moran? Not seeing any. Thank you so much. And our last proponent is Deb Newman. And before you start, Ms. Newman, I'm just going to turn to the attendees and ask everybody who's here to speak in opposition to LD 1403 to please raise your electronic hands and keep them up. And then now, Ms. Newman, thank you so much for being here, and you can begin when you're ready.
Well, thank you, Senator Carney and members of the committee. I am Deb Newman, President and CEO of the Bangor Region Chamber of Commerce, and I'm providing a comment on behalf of the Bangor Region Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. By way of background, our chamber serves 21 communities. We represent close to 700 members with more than 25,000 employees. And our membership includes hospitality, retail, restaurants, service businesses, healthcare, financial and educational institutions, and more. Since March of 2020, our focus has been working to support our members most affected by the pandemic to ensure they remain in business and continue to provide critical jobs in our communities. The Bangor Region Chamber of Commerce, we strongly support this bill, LD 1403, as Maine employers have faced unprecedented challenges during this pandemic, including complying with CDC guidelines and state mandates to protect their workers. I personally cannot think of an employer with whom we've worked during these past 14 challenging months that has not gone above and beyond to protect the health and safety of their employees. They have made that their top priority, even if it meant sacrificing a sale or losing a customer. Now, as has been mentioned, this bill does provide a limitation against liability from suits alleging personal injury from or related to alleged exposure to coronavirus during the course of engaging in the business or organization's activity, unless there is convincing evidence of gross negligence. Now, if a business has followed all of the rules and complied with CDC guidelines, they should not be held liable if an employee contracts coronavirus and claims they contracted it at work. This bill will protect the liability, risk, and cost of defense for businesses that have operated in the very best interest of their employees, their customers, and their communities during the pandemic. The businesses, organizations, and municipalities to whom this bill applies are critical to the future of the Bangor region and our state's economy. And as we continue to move through into the other side of this pandemic, hopefully soon, we ask that you work to ensure their survival. We'd also like to thank the Maine State Chamber for their efforts in crafting this bill, and Representative Dillingham for sponsoring, and Senator Stewart, and Senator Diamond for co-sponsoring. We appreciate your time and thoughtful consideration. Happy to answer any questions, and I did submit this testimony as well.
Thank you so much, Ms. Newman. Committee members, are there any questions for Ms. Newman? I have a clarifying question for you. I wasn't sure I understood your testimony with regard to workers' compensation claims. Is it your position that the immunity should extend to workers' compensation claims, or that workers' compensation claims should be accepted from the statute and then proceed kind of normally as they would under the workers' compensation law?
We agree with the position that's being taken on that issue with the Maine State Chamber, and also what Greg Dougal stated earlier. So we're in alignment with that. Certainly not an expert on workers' compensation, but happy to discuss that further or participate in the work session around that discussion.
No, I think you answered the question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So you feel that the workers' comp framework should continue to function normally?
Correct.
Great. Okay. Thank you. So I think that concludes everyone who registered in advance or signed up today to provide testimony in support of this legislation. So now we'll move to those who are in opposition. We've got 4 people with their hands raised, and so I'll just start bringing them in. We'll begin with Andrew Mason. Welcome, Mr. Mason. You can activate your audio and video whenever you're ready.
I'm trying. Thank you.
You succeeded. Go ahead. And I'll be running, I don't know if you were in the attendee space when I said this, but I would just want to remind everybody I'll be running a 3-minute clock. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I was actually here this morning when Representative Harnett came on and said hello to nobody. And I felt bad because I was early, and hello, I take your hello. Senator Carney, Representative Harnett, and other members of the Joint Standing Committee on Judiciary. My name is Andrew Mason. I'm a resident of Topsom. I'm here on behalf of the Maine Education Association to testify in opposition to LD 1403. MEA opposes this liability shield for a number of reasons. First, as Maine and other states are slowly moving away from the worst of the pandemic, and has been confirmed by most of the speakers that are in favor of the bill, there's been virtually no litigation brought against businesses by employees related to COVID exposure claims. It is conceded by most attorneys on both the management and the employee side that proving causation is such a high hurdle that it alone acts to serve as a check on pursuing litigation, because it's very difficult to isolate where an employee was infected with the virus, such that an employer could be held legally responsible even without this bill. Second, because proving causation is so difficult on its own, it's unfair to completely eliminate legal remedies for those employees who can prove that they were exposed in a negligent manner. Again, even proving causation does not on its own make an employer liable for the employee's infection, because an employee still has the burden to prove the employer acted negligently in some manner. An employer who acts reasonably and takes preventative measures will also not be found liable. In essence, this bill only protects those employers who flout safety measures and put its employees in danger as a result. Those are the type of employers who need to be held accountable. Finally, we're over a year into this pandemic, and it is clear there has not been a rush to the courthouse, in part because of the issues I raised. If we've gotten through the worst of the pandemic without seeing any actual increase in litigating COVID-related claims, it feels there's no pressing need to provide employers such blanket liability when the current laws are doing their job. The legislature regularly hears from employer lobbyists who say they are being unfairly targeted by employee-friendly organizations, and that the vast majority of employers work hard to do the right thing. We do not disagree. And because the vast majority of employers have been acting with the best interest of employees in mind, that is the reason this bill and its protections of those stray employers who should be held accountable is not necessary. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mason. Committee members, are there any questions for Mr. Mason? Not seeing any. We appreciate you appearing before the committee today.
Thank you very much.
We've been joined by our next presenter, Michael Kebeda. And Mr. Kebeda, you can begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Senator Carney, Representative Harnett, and distinguished members of the committee. Good morning. My name is Michael Kebeda, and I'm Policy Counsel for the ACLU of Maine. On behalf of our members, we urge you to vote against both this bill and LD 1419. I will present my testimony on both bills simultaneously now. Where there's a right, there's a remedy. This simple concept has been a central feature of our legal system for its entire existence. These bills seek to turn this basic concept on its head by exempting certain entities from liability because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Enacting these bills would create public policy that incentivizes businesses, municipalities, and even hospitals to cut corners when it comes to health and safety measures. Granting employers a level of legal immunity from accountability to their workers would make it less likely that employers take the steps necessary to protect working people's health. This would further endanger and disadvantage the health and economic security of people of color, women, and low-income people who disproportionately work in essential jobs. Immunity from liability would eliminate these workers' already limited ability to seek justice in the courts and remove a powerful incentive for businesses to maintain a safe working environment, putting our communities at increased risk of illness and death. Legal immunity would also further threaten the health and safety of seniors and people with disabilities. Residents and staff of nursing homes, assisted living facilities, and other congregate care settings, including hospitals, continue to be at a particular risk of illness and death during this pandemic. Removing the ability of patients, residents, and their families to hold these facilities accountable for harm they cause may put even more lives in jeopardy and result in an increase in resident deaths. In addition to congregate care facilities, older people and people with disabilities, both as workers and as consumers, are made more vulnerable if grocery stores, pharmacies, hospitals, and other essential businesses fail to take proper health and safety precautions. Now, judges already have inherent power to sanction people who bring frivolous lawsuits, and lawyers are specifically prohibited by rules of civil procedure and by ethical rules from bringing frivolous lawsuits. This bill is unnecessary to keep frivolous lawsuits at bay. As Curtis Picard and Greg Dougal testified, there have been no lawsuits so far. This bill is a solution in search of a problem. We believe that judges should make this area of law on a case-by-case basis. We urge you to vote ought not to pass, and I thank you for your time and attention, and I'm happy to try to answer questions.
Thank you very much. There is a question from Senator Sanborn. Go ahead, Senator Sanborn.
Thank you, Senator Carney. And thanks for being here, Mr. Kebeda. Can you tell us today if someone were to file a lawsuit under current law against a business that was following all of the checklist rules, how would the judge handle that?
I think under traditional tort law.
And so the checklist would serve as a defense?
Well, you could try it, but if I knew exactly what a judge would do, I would be living in a warm tropical location right now, in a big mansion. There's really no knowing, frankly. And I think that's partly why trial lawyers have been very reluctant to bring these cases. They are extremely expensive. The standards have shifted throughout the pandemic, as you heard. And so the high barrier that exists has already served to prevent trial lawyers from bringing these lawsuits. Probably a judge would use the government's checklist as a bar from liability. That's probably what would happen, but I can't tell you definitively. As a lawyer, I'm sure you would hesitate from doing the same.
Thanks.
Thank you for the question, Senator Sanborn. Representative Moriarty, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Kebeda, do you agree that under the Workers' Compensation Act, employers are immune from civil lawsuit for injuries sustained on the job by their employees?
Well, I think that's the general rule, but I think there are exceptions. And I don't have all of them in my head right now. as someone who's only dealt with a couple of worker compensation things years and years ago. But I believe Senator Carney used to be an employment litigator. I might pose the question to your colleague.
Well, I also worked in the field as well. I think we're both familiar with it.
I see. Well, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
A good topic for conversation at the work session. Thank you very much, Mr. Kevada. Are there any other questions on committee members for Mr. Kevada? Not seeing any, so we'll move on to our next speaker, Timothy Kenlon. And Mr. Kenlon, you can begin whenever you're ready.
Good morning. Thank you, Senator Carney, Representative Harnett, members of the committee. My name is Timothy Kenlon. I'm a partner at the law firm of Berman & Simmons here in Lewiston, and I am here today to oppose LD 1403. Many of the reasons were actually stated by those in favor of this bill as to why it ought not to pass, including the fact that there has not been a wave of lawsuits that were expected or predicted by those who are seeking this immunity provision. Additionally, I would urge the committee to consider the constitutionality of enacting a law with a retroactive effective immunity as to whether that comports with principles of due process in allowing litigants to seek redress for their grievances under the judicial system. We have a system of divided government in which we have a legislative branch, an executive branch, and a judiciary branch. This law seeks to usurp the power of the judiciary as well as the power of Maine citizens to decide what is appropriate conduct in our business community, in our nonprofits, and in our educational facilities. The purpose of tort law is for the community to set the standards of acceptable conduct. And to pass a law such as this, which enlarges the purview of the legislature as opposed to that of the judiciary and the people to make those decisions, the people of the jury to decide whether conduct is appropriate or not, is simply an inappropriate usurpation of that power from the judiciary committee or the judiciary branch. There are already protections in place that prevent frivolous lawsuits, as Mr. Kebita cited earlier. Rule 11 of the Rules of Civil Procedure prevent lawyers from bringing claims that are not meritorious. And there are procedures in place through the judicial system, including motions to dismiss, motions for summary judgment, that prevent those quote unquote frivolous cases from ever reaching a jury or affecting somebody, a business or an employer. Finally, I've heard a lot of the business community discuss whether an employer might be liable for an employee becoming sick with COVID-19. And every single member has stated that they approve of the idea that this bill should not affect the workers' compensation system. And so if that's true, workers' compensation already provides immunity to the employer for any lawsuit. But I will state that if this bill were to pass, it could effectively prevent employers who do have to pay out workers' compensation claims from seeking recovery from a third party who might have caused an infection at a facility. So for example, at a grocery store, an employee gets sick because a third party delivery driver was ill and came in and they spent time unloading a truck together. Under the ordinary tort system, the company, the grocery store, would have a claim to make against the delivery driver for bringing in the infection and causing their employee to be sick, and therefore they could be recompensated for the money that they had to pay out in the workers' compensation claim. If this bill were to pass, that would effectively be barred. And I see that my time is running out, so I welcome any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kenlon. And I see that Representative Thorne has a question. Go ahead, Representative Thorne.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome, Mr. Kenlon. I'm just curious. I mean, understanding that there are lawsuits that have been started all over the country since this pandemic began, does it not behoove us to get ahead of the curve and, before they come to Maine and try to stem the tide and set a precedence? And obviously, those businesses that don't follow the guidelines would not be immune. So is that more of a reasonable request?
Thank you, Representative Thorne. I think the question starts from the premise that the fact that there are lawsuits is necessarily a bad thing. And as a lawyer, I don't think that that is true. And as a human being, I don't think that that is true, because that is how we set the standards and resolve disputes that cannot be resolved otherwise. So particularly in tort lawsuits involving COVID-19, if these things are going through the court system, the mere fact that a lawsuit is filed does not mean it's going to go anywhere. It could immediately be dismissed if there are frivolous grounds for it to have been brought. But also, we want juries to decide these cases and help us as members of society to determine the bounds of what's reasonable. Tort law is based entirely on reasonableness. And so if we don't have anybody making those decisions, if we don't have community buy-in to make those decisions, I think we risk losing what makes us community at all. The risk I see in this bill is that it increases substantially the burden to a clear and convincing standard of evidence as opposed to preponderance of the evidence, which is currently the standard. And that's my concern. So I don't see the concern being that lawsuits have been filed. I think that suggests a problem that just doesn't exist.
Clarifying question, if I may, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
So are you saying that this, the tort law entirely covers everything that the pandemic lawsuits would preclude?
In short, yes. And a slightly
On
long
the record.
I think that the systems we have in place already are sufficient to handle any disputes relating to COVID-19.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Moriarty, did you have a question, or is that your hand up from previously?
No, I do have a question. Thank you,
Go
Madam
ahead.
Chair. Mr. Kenlon, is it fair to say that civil litigation has basically come to a halt since the declaration of the state of emergency?
That is a fair statement. We are still getting work done, but the fact that there has been not a single civil jury trial since March of 2020 has really left a lot of my clients in a lurch, where either they will opt to accept a settlement that's not fair because they might have to wait indefinitely to have a trial, or I have clients who've been waiting already a year plus to be heard, and it could be 2, 3, 4 more years before we see the inside of courtroom. So yes, I think that's a fair statement.
So just as a quick follow-up, is the lack of COVID-related litigation to date necessarily an indicator of what may happen once the state of emergency is lifted?
No, Mr. Moriarty, I don't believe so. We are still filing lawsuits on a, I wouldn't say daily basis, but regularly in the normal course of things that we would pre-pandemic. It simply means a delay, a potential delay in justice. So, the fact that there have not been any lawsuits filed yet in Maine is not a reflection of the fact that justice is being delayed in civil jury trials.
Thank you.
Representative Babbage, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Kenlon, thank you for testifying today. I just wanted to make sure I understood what you had said earlier in response to Representative Thorne. You referenced burden of proof, and I wanted to understand the context. How did you use clear and convincing versus preponderance?
Sure, thank you, Representative Babbage. In the proposed legislation, and I can read it, it states that absent clear and actual or alleged exposure to coronavirus proven by clear and convincing evidence to be the result of gross negligence, willful misconduct. So that's an increase in the burden to a plaintiff bringing a case, as opposed to a normal tort case where the burden is a preponderance of the evidence or more likely than not standard. So this requires a little bit more of a plaintiff seeking to bring a claim here. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other committee questions. Thanks for testifying today, Mr. Kenlon. And we've been joined by James Mile. And Mr. Mile, you can begin when you're ready.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Senator Carney, Representative Harnett, members of the committee. My name is James Mile. I'm a policy analyst at the Maine Center for Economic Policy, and I'm here today to testify in opposition to LD 1403. As you've heard what the bill does, so I won't necessarily go through all that necessarily, but I will say that, you know, under the guise of protecting employers, this bill really risks creating a free pass for organizations to put employees and customers at risk, or depriving those same employees and customers of fundamental legal protections. While I'll acknowledge that the bill does not completely absolve employers for their responsibility for public health guidelines, MECEP is concerned that the bill will give employers the ability to act carelessly and to put their workers at risk unnecessarily. As we try to continue to contain the coronavirus, it's important to remember that the workplace health is synonymous with public health. Practices contained to one workplace or job site do not only affect the people there, they affect all of us. Simply put, we can't ensure that Mainers are protected from COVID-19 or other risks from lax health and safety standards if we create the kind of loopholes proposed by LD 1403. This bill would be particularly harmful for frontline workers, such as those in healthcare, government, retail, or hospitality. While Maine has not published data on the occupation of folks who are infected with COVID-19, we do know from many other states, such as Washington, California, and Massachusetts, that many frontline occupations have seen increased levels of infection and even death over the past year as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. Undermining the right of employees and customers to hold their employers responsible for jeopardizing their health and safety is a slap in the face to those frontline workers who have already had very little control over their working conditions. What's more, workers already have very few options available to hold bad employers accountable for their actions. Under the last federal administration, the Occupational Health and Safety Administration had all but abandoned any responsibility for enforcing COVID-19 safety and workplaces, issuing only voluntary. Additionally, as I think you've heard from some folks who have more legal expertise than me, the bar for a successful personal injury lawsuit is already very high, with the burden of proof placed on the injured employee. There's no demonstrable case that LD 1403 is needed to protect employers, and passing this bill is only going to serve to embolden bad employers by cutting off one of workers' few remaining avenues to address serious health and safety problems. Maine's workers are the backbone of our economy, and we can't leave any workers behind if we're going to have a full and equitable economic recovery. This includes ensuring that Mainers have confidence that they can go to work without putting their health at risk, and similarly, customers are going to want the same assurance that businesses have not been given a green light to relax their guard against COVID-19 or other threats to health and safety. If we want our economy to bounce back stronger than before, we need to pay attention to public health, continue protections for frontline workers who have kept Maine going through the pandemic, and we can't take away their right to redress against a bad employer. I would urge you to vote or not to pass on LD 1403. Thank you, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mile. There were a few portions of your testimony where your screen froze up just for a second. Did you provide written testimony as well? Or could you?
I did submit that, yes. I apologize for my bad connection, but yes, I sent a written testimony.
No, I just want to make sure that we have the opportunity to catch those few little pieces that we missed. Thank you so much. Any questions, committee members? Not seeing any. Thank you very much for providing testimony today. And we have our last opponent is about to speak, but prior to that, I'm just going to ask, no one signed up to testify neither for nor against. However, if you are in the attendee space and you wish to testify neither for nor against on 1403, please raise your electronic hand. And Mr. Good, welcome to the Judiciary Committee. You can begin when you're ready.
Good morning, Senator Carney, Representative Harnett, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Judiciary. My name is Adam Good. I'm the legislative and political director of the Maine AFL-CIO. We represent 40,000 working people in the state of Maine. We work to improve the lives and working conditions of our members and all working people. We testify in opposition to 1403. We fundamentally believe workers and members of the public who may be exposed to COVID through these institutions at hand deserve their basic rights and a day in court. We want to start off just by reminding everybody that we have an opportunity to end the COVID-19 pandemic. And after doing so much right in the last 14 months, why would we give businesses, schools, municipalities a permission slip to be free from responsibility should they contribute to the spread of COVID-19? There have been many good signs recently, but we also just want to remind the committee that this difficult time is not over. Multiple reports of outbreaks are happening, and the increased likelihood that employers seeking immunity in this bill will have customers and workers who are unvaccinated interacting with each other, with patients, and with the public means we should avoid unnecessary risk. There have been very few lawsuits related to businesses, municipalities, and educational institutions being liable for COVID-19 cases. In the cases where there are lawsuits, the worker or customer is still required to prove they contracted COVID-19 through the institution in question. We think that's a high bar to achieve. And we think it's a sufficient level of protection from any undue level of harm lawsuits would cause these institutions. You've already heard, and we would reiterate, that this is a solution in search of a problem. I did a little bit of research just around different trackers online around, how much of a problem this is. I found 2 employer side trackers. So arguably, if biased at all, they'd be biased in the side of the employers, one of which was Hunton Andrews Kurth, a law firm representing banks, insurance, and energy industry businesses. They listed only 22 complaints in Maine during the pandemic. 2 of those 22 cases were related to labor issues. Nationally, I found 180 cases related to COVID-19. That's 3.6 cases per state. Fisher Phillips was another one I found, one of the largest US law firms representing management on labor issues. Their tracker only had 1 case in Maine, and it was for a whistleblower and retaliation issue. We think it's an untimely bill. We think you should vote ought not to pass. If you do go forward, we had a number of questions, especially related to gross negligence. There's lots of different standards and guidance. So which standards and guidance the actor should be following seems very confusing. And then even when you do define standards and guidance, it was very confusing. And I see my time is up here. It was very confusing as to how you would define enforcement. We've all been in supermarkets with dots on the floor saying people should be 6 feet apart, and that's not always enforced. We've all been in places where people are expected to wear masks and the masks are below their nose. So that is my testimony. I appreciate your time and attention. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Good. I see we have a question from Representative Thorne. Go ahead, Representative Thorne.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Good, for appearing today and providing your testimony. And I guess I just, for clarification purposes, it just seemed like a contradiction in testimony to say, give businesses a carte blanche, a free rein. And then on the other hand, there are those liability exemptions, which include gross negligence, willful misconduct, intentional criminal conduct, or intentional infliction of harm. And it seems like if businesses are doing everything that they can, but it doesn't exempt those that are blatant, I'm trying to see where the burden of responsibility should fall on the business if they're doing everything that they can. Maybe you could help me with that.
Yeah, and we represent workers in this, and we want to bring that perspective to the committee, and it's why we decided to testify on this today. The gross negligence section, from my understanding, it says knowingly violates government standards and guidance, but the government standards and guidance seem to change very often, and that's very confusing as to which ones would actually be followed. And then I think we've all been inside businesses where there's a sign that says something, but whether the business is actually enforcing that guidance seems very confusing. And that feels like it would be just a very hard thing to define should you decide to go forward with the bill. And then, there's risks at hand for everybody related to COVID. And I think giving a permission slip for employers to slack in some of their responsibility in all of this sends a really bad message going forward. We want a culture where employees feel free to bring forward complaints and to bring forward grievances around this. And I think if we made this big change, there'd be a chilling effect on people speaking up when there are problems. So going forward, we really just think that the system in place works well. We have not seen this happen often, and it's not a big deal. It's a solution in search of a problem. And want to just be really clear that workers, give up a lot when they're going into work in these situations and should have this basic level of protection.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Good? Not seeing any, and thank you very much, Mr. Good. And next we'll hear from our last person who's speaking in opposition, who just joined us from the Labor and Housing Committee, and that's Jeffrey Young. Mr. Young, you can activate your audio and video and begin your 3 minutes when you're ready.
I am ready. Thank you, Senator Carney, Representative Harnett, and members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Jeffrey Neal Young. I'm an attorney with Solidarity Law, and I'm here today to testify on behalf of the Maine.
Mr. Young, I don't know if you can hear
Lawyers
us.
Association, lawyers in the state.
Mr. Young,
Can you hear me?
You're breaking up a little bit. Why don't you deactivate the video and just do audio, please? I think that'll.
Okay.
Perfect.
Hopefully that's better.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Anyway, we are 75 employees who represent employees in civil rights matters throughout the state. I'm sorry I joined late, so some of what I have to say may echo what Adam Good had to say. I did pick up that he cited to the two COVID trackers that are maintained by management law firms, Fisher and Phillips and Hunton, Andrews and Kurtz. And those studies or those trackers show that this bill is really proposing a solution in search of a problem. There has been negligible litigation related to COVID-19 here in the state of Maine. In particular, we're a little bit unclear whether the 1403 as written would include employment litigation. We want to make sure that it doesn't, although we agree generally that it shouldn't be passed at all. But I note that there have only been one report shows 2 employment cases and one shows 1 employment case. I'd also pick up on the fact that the bill, I think, is written as unclear and vague. Section 2 of the bill refers to applicable government standards and guidance, but it's unclear what that applicable government standards and guidance are. Is that from the Center for Disease Control on the federal level, other proposals or guidance from the federal government, or some of the more stringent standards adopted here in Maine? The last point that I would like to make is that the 1-year statute of limitations in Section 4 is entirely too short. Personal injury is generally a 6-year statute of limitations here in Maine. And while we clearly oppose passage of the bill, if for some reason the committee were going to consider in any way passing or amending the bill, that statute of limitations needs to be enlarged to match other personal injury claims. There isn't any reason to significantly or dramatically reduce the statute of limitations for periods related to COVID-19. Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to be heard this morning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Young. Committee members, are there any questions for Mr. Young? Not seeing any. Thank you so much for providing your testimony to the committee today. And with that, I think we have heard everyone who wished to speak on 1403. And I'll just turn one more time to the attendee portion of the meeting. If you wished to speak on 1403, either for, against, or neither for nor against, please raise your electronic hand. And I Not seeing any electronic hands. So with that, we will thank the bill's sponsor, Representative Dillingham, and close the public hearing on LD 1403. And that takes us to our next public hearing, which is on LD 1419, an act to support healthcare providers during state public health emergencies. And that is sponsored by Senator Moore, who I believe is here. We'll just find her and bring her to the panel. Senator Moore, welcome to the Judiciary Committee. It's nice to see you this morning.
Absolutely. Good morning. And thank you for moving me up the line a little bit there. I'm in the middle of work sessions for HHS and then going to get on the road to go back down east. So thank you so much for this consideration. So good morning, Senator Carney, Representative Harnett, and distinguished members of the Judiciary Joint Standing Committee. My name is Marianne Moore, and I proudly represent Senate District 6, which includes all of Washington County, along with Winter Harbor, Goldsboro, and Sullivan in Hancock County as well. I am here to introduce LD 1419, as Senator Carney explained. It's an act to support healthcare providers during state public health emergencies. I urge your support for the bill and all the healthcare workers who have so valiantly been on the front lines throughout this pandemic. These essential workers have worked hard trying to prevent, test, treat, and heal the over 60,000 Mainers who have contracted COVID-19 and the over 1,800 who have been hospitalized. Unfortunately, because the virus is so dangerous and easily spread, over 788 Mainers have died from it so far. We now see it at its worst in India, demonstrating this pandemic is a worldwide crisis we cannot hide from. We are all confronting an invisible threat to our health, families, friends, communities, our state, as well as our own livelihoods. Yet despite this danger, Maine's healthcare workers have not hesitated to do their best as the pandemic spread and the science around it evolved. Importantly, as this health emergency started, Maine's health community was told to tackle the virus as best they could and prepare for the worst, with limited, sometimes non-existent PPE and other critical supplies. At the same time, they were urged to defer treatment and minimize direct contact with their patients to mitigate the spread of the virus, as well as reserving capacity for a potential surge in acute respiratory illnesses. Elective surgeries, screenings, primary care, dental care, and so much more were greatly curtailed in response to the executive orders that were issued. At the same time, providers of residential services face the challenge of continuing to deliver essential care in the face of a novel viral illness that was highly contagious, poorly understood, and difficult to treat, while guidance on how to proceed with essential services while protecting both patients and workers was incomplete, ever-changing, and sometimes internally inconsistent. This bill responds in a simple, fundamental, and rational way to these extraordinary conditions. On behalf of the Maine community, it says to our healthcare workers, because you, the health professional, did not hesitate as you responded to this unprecedented pandemic, we as a community should limit your professional liability for your efforts to protect and deliver essential healthcare to us. The bill says that unless an injury or death was caused by an act or omission constituting willful, wanton, or reckless conduct, or by gross negligence, a covered person or entity as defined in the bill will not be liable for its action or inaction during a declared health emergency. The bill applies to the current and ongoing declared health emergency, as well as any future similar event, so that healthcare workers understand Maine remains a quality place to work, as well as a place that wants to attract new healthcare workers to the state. I would like to suggest an amendment to the bill to clarify that this immunity applies whether a healthcare service was delivered or was deferred, delayed, or canceled in response to the emergency orders issued in a declared emergency. I have attached suggested clarifying language for the amendment to my written testimony. Thank you for your consideration. I hope we all can support our healthcare workers and institutions that have done so much for all of us during these trying times. And as I said, I have the proposed amendment is attached to my testimony. I'll be glad to answer any questions that I possibly can at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Moore. And we're really grateful to you for thinking ahead and providing us with the proposed amendment today. It helps move our work forward. I see that there are a couple of hands up, and we'll start with Representative Moriarty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Senator Moore.
Good morning.
Is the intent of the bill basically to immunize healthcare providers and institutions for COVID-related complications, disease, and other related effects?
Well, my understanding of the bill, and there will be others that will come after me that may be able to clarify a little bit better. My understanding is this is not just for COVID-19. Oftentimes when we are in a state of an emergency, such as we are right now because of the pandemic, we have to make choices. Healthcare workers have to make choices of, and I hate to say, who we're going to treat, who we're not going to treat, or when we were setting priorities about who was actually being hospitalized, who was put on ventilators. And I don't feel like our healthcare workers should have to be afraid that they can't make these health decisions and then still be liable for something, unless they've done something wrong. But if they're just following guidelines, this is just holding them where they will not be held accountable for it, or it gives them the immunity, I guess is what I want to say.
Okay. If I could ask a follow-up question, Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Here's the concern that I have. Suppose that during the emergency, a person underwent a routine orthopedic procedure, and there may have been an act of malpractice having nothing whatsoever to do with COVID, and producing an injury that had nothing whatsoever to do with COVID. Why should immunity apply in that context?
Well, immunity would not apply in that context because they were actually, if there was an injury or something was not done correctly, they would still have the ability to follow up. This is not. I do say that exactly. It says that unless an injury or death was caused by an act or omission constituting willful or reckless conduct or gross negligence, the covered person in the defined bill will not be liable, but they would be liable in the other case.
Well, there is an issue here concerning whether or not liability applies to any healthcare service rendered during the course of an emergency. And I'm just suggesting that medical services unrelated to COVID producing harm unrelated to COVID perhaps need not necessarily be protected.
And I would be willing to, if we need to change some of the wording, I would definitely support that.
Okay, thank you.
To make it clearer.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Moore, and thanks, Representative Moriarty. Representative Harnett, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Senator Moore, nice to see you again. I don't know if you were listening to the testimony on another bill dealing with this, the larger issue about COVID and liability, LD 1403.
Yeah.
And I just wanted, one of the things that bill did was change the statute of limitations. Your bill does not do that, am I correct?
No, it does not. Doesn't address that at all.
It just changes the standard and the burden of proof.
And that's correct. And protecting our healthcare workers during the times of a declared emergency.
Okay, thank you very much, Senator.
You're welcome.
Not seeing any additional questions for Senator Moore. Senator Moore, I know that you're being pulled in a lot of different directions. You're welcome to stay on the panel if you would like.
Now I'm going to go ahead and jump off, and I really appreciate your time today and hearing my presentation. I'm going to jump back into the work sessions on HHS. So thank you so much. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you. And now I'll turn to those who are in the attendee portion of the meeting and ask those who wish to speak in favor of LD 1419 to please raise your electronic hands and keep them raised, because that is how I will identify you to bring you in and out of the meeting. It looks like we have 4 speaking in favor. And so I'm just going to start moving folks in. First will be Frank Chessa. And Mr. Chessa, when you arrive, you probably can't hear me in transition. Mr. Chessa, you can go ahead and begin your testimony whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much. Senator Carney, Representative Harnett, and distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Judiciary. My name is Frank Chessa. I am Director of Clinical Ethics at Maine Medical Center, and I am here to testify in support of LD 1419, an act to support healthcare providers during the state public health emergency. In the words of the National Academy of Medicine, public health disasters justify temporarily adjusting practice standards and/or shifting the balance of ethical concerns to emphasize the needs of the community rather than the needs of individuals. In short, the emergency requires the healthcare system to elevate the ethical importance of population health. There's been a good deal of focus over the last year on the potential shortage of ventilators and critical care resources for persons with respiratory failure due to COVID-19. This is an important topic, but focusing on it obscures the other ways in which the COVID-19 pandemic has shifted the standard of care. To use an example from my experience, cancellation of blood drives and other changes in the operation of the American Red Cross caused blood shortages nationally. These shortages required us to meet almost daily to prioritize which cases went to surgery. You cannot always predict which patients will hemorrhage during surgery, and it would be unsafe to take 2 patients who are at moderate risk for hemorrhage to the operating room at the same time if you only had enough blood product to rescue one of them. We were in this situation many times in the last year. These circumstances required us to stagger surgeries, delay, and cancel surgeries. While there may be a risk to delaying a surgery, the physicians involved determined that the risk of a patient bleeding out during surgery was greater. There is no substitute for using clinical judgment during rapidly changing circumstances to prioritize patient well-being. The reason to support this legislation is that difficult choices cannot be avoided in times of crisis. Clinicians need to have the confidence to use their clinical judgment to prioritize patient well-being in rapidly changing circumstances. This is what should be driving their decisions in the moment, not legalistic concerns about practicing under usual standards of care that do not serve patient interests during a crisis. And after the crisis has passed, as memories fade, it's not fair to judge clinicians as if the emergency conditions had not existed. Thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chessa. Committee members, are there any questions for Mr. Chessa? Not seeing any. We appreciate you being here today.
Thank you.
And then next we have Andrew Cashman. And Mr. Cashman, did you wish to speak on 1419 or a different bill?
Both, actually, 1419 and a few others. So
sure, go ahead then.
Thank you very much, Senator Carney, Representative Harnett, distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on the Judiciary. It's nice to see everybody this morning. I'm here on behalf for LD 1419 on behalf of my client, the Maine Healthcare Association, which represents nursing homes and PNMI assisted living facilities throughout our state. And, you know, this pandemic has been extraordinarily difficult for nursing homes in Maine and throughout the country. We've been very lucky to have comparatively lower infection rates and mortality rates because of the hard work, very hard work of the workers in our facilities. Nevertheless, this is a virus that has really preyed on the elderly and on congregate care settings. We only view this bill as protection for our workers. We call, throughout this pandemic, we've called healthcare workers heroes, and absolutely rightly so. Healthcare workers are unique. It's interesting, during this pandemic, I read this book called The Great Influenza, which was about the 1918 pandemic, you might have read. And in that, there was a lot of discussion about the shortage of healthcare workers during the pandemic. They burned through those workers very quickly and became very desperate for more. So they started soliciting anybody that had any experience, any training whatsoever, to provide nursing care and so on. And to such an extent that there's a part in the book where they talk about a woman who got pulled out of a movie theater mid-movie because somebody found out that she had nursing experience and she was put to work. We ask our healthcare workers to do things that nobody else is asked to do during healthcare crises. There's actually something called a medical draft, which I didn't know about until this pandemic, where people with certain healthcare credentials can be drafted just like the military draft. So they're unique. And we view this as a worker protection bill. It's something that is a way of not just saying that healthcare workers are heroes for the work that they've done, wearing PPE in incredibly difficult situations, putting themselves at risk by running into these very difficult and very risky situations, putting themselves and their families at risk. But it's a way of really having their back at the end of the day. We also view this as a worker recruitment issue. If people know that at the end of the day, this bill is considered and not supported, what message does that send to people to say, yes, we want you to work in these difficult situations. We're asking you to do something we're not asking anybody else to do. And incidentally, if lawsuits are brought against you, we're not going to protect you against those despite your best efforts. The bill provides more than adequate protection for real issues that arise in care. But at the end of the day, it does support workers over frivolous lawsuits. And there's been lots of discussion about protections against frivolous lawsuits. But at the end of the day, we all know that those protections are against ultimate lawsuits and what happens in trial. It's not against a case that's brought. It is traumatic for a worker to have a case brought at all and filed against them. And this is a protection for those workers. I see that my time is up, so I appreciate that, and I don't want to take any more of the committee's time on this. But I will say that,
we're
one last
holding
point,
everybody, just to be fair to everybody, we're holding them all to 3 minutes.
No, I appreciate that. Well, thank you. And I will just say that there have been no cases filed, but there are solicitations being made. So that's why we want our workers to be protected. I appreciate the committee's time. Thank you, Senator.
Not seeing any. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We'll move on to our next speaker, Amanda Richards. And Ms. Richards, you can activate and you can begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Senator. Good morning, Senator Carney, Representative Harnett, and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Amanda Richards, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Maine Osteopathic Association. On behalf of our physician members, I'm pleased to provide testimony in support of LD 1419. The Maine Osteopathic Association is a professional organization representing more than 1,000 osteopathic physicians, residents, and students practicing in Maine. We strongly support this bill, which we believe is an imperative effort to support healthcare providers during state of Maine declared public health emergencies. With the onset of the pandemic, medical care has often been delayed, denied, or canceled in response to state orders or facility mandates due to COVID. Healthcare facilities have experienced shortages of beds, ventilators, and other necessary supplies, including personal protective equipment or PPE. Despite these conditions, physicians and other healthcare providers have continuously strived to maintain a high level of patient care, at times putting their health at risk to do so. As such, we believe they deserve liability protection to ensure that their careers will not be affected by circumstances beyond their control. We also support the amendment proposed by Senator Moore. Several of our physician members have submitted statements of support for the bill, and I would like to share some excerpts of those personal statements with you. Brian Kaufman-Dio, who holds board certification in internal medicine, pain medicine, neuromusculoskeletal medicine, and addiction medicine, writes, "Every day, as I always have, I travel from my home to my outpatient practice to continue serving the patients that rely on my care. We underwent major changes to decrease exposure by doing carside visits, telehealth, and telephonic visits. In pain management, as well as in addiction medicine, there is a need for frequent in-person monitoring for drug screenings, pill counts, etc. Staff have continued to maintain safe conditions, and while there were no infectious contacts associated with our office, this contact is a persistent concern, and many patients worry about avoiding contact, at times causing them to miss appointments or procedures. Obviously, this opens the door for liability. Many offices have simply closed their doors or refused to engage in anything other than emergency treatment due to risk of exposure. Myself and my colleagues have continued to provide the best care that we're able to do, regardless of the risks. Another physician, Isabella Escaridio, practices emergency medicine in Central Maine. She shares that some patients have been resistant to mask wearing or complying with COVID screening and testing. Staff do their best despite this non-compliance, but shortages mean that they are physically and mentally pushed to the limit. Patients that refuse to comply with these simple precautions put staff at risk as well as other patients. These examples show that they need this protection. You also have written testimony from our national affiliate, the American Osteopathic Association, who has shared their support for this bill. The bottom line is that these are special circumstances, and we believe that they bring about additional risk for our healthcare providers. It's unfair for them to face retribution for these extenuating circumstances in the future and face their careers being put on the line after they have risked so much to serve on the front lines against an unknown virus. Thank you, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you so much, Ms. Richards. Committee members, are there any questions? Oops. And did you provide your written testimony as well?
I did.
Thank you. Great. Thank you so much. We appreciate you being here today. There aren't any questions. Mr. Sultan, welcome to the Judiciary Committee, and you can begin your testimony whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much, Senator Carney and Representative Harnett and members of the committee. And since no one ever says this, also hi to Peggy and Soupy. Hope everybody's doing well. I am here on behalf of 3 clients, the Maine Association of Osteopathic Physicians, the Maine Society of Anesthesiologists, and Medical Mutual Insurance Company of Maine. I have written testimony that I will upload shortly as I finish fixing a few typos in it and so on. But I want to respond to a few points that have been made previously and to answer a few questions. Representative Moriarty, it is certainly the intent of the bill to only have healthcare that is directly impacted by the COVID-19 virus or in a future pandemic by whatever that particular issue is. So for example, if in surgery a sponge was left in, and, that's completely unrelated to the COVID issue and the pandemic, that would certainly still be a case that would be brought and won. And so in your case, the orthopedic surgery, if there was an error there, that would still be fully, case brought just like it is today. So the intent, and I would point your direction to on page 2 to line 6, and the intent there was to limit it to the pandemic related issues. And then with Senator Moore's amendment, it is both to services delivered and then services that couldn't be delivered, and as Mr. Chessie testified to. So that's really the scope of the bill, and it's intended to be that narrow. And it is based off of law we already have here in Maine, the volunteer immunity provisions that are in the Health Security Act. And so it is patterned very much like that. And it would be a shame, we think, as members of the healthcare community to treat volunteers in the exact same situation during the pandemic as those who continued to work for their facility, for their practice on behalf of their patients. And it was a very trying time. A lot has been made this morning about so few cases, if any, being brought. That is true. As some of you have mentioned earlier, the courts have been closed. And of course, the statute of limitations has not run. And so most of these cases are not brought right away. You wait until you see what kind of illness or injury and how it progresses before they are brought. So it is not surprising that here in Maine, at least, while the courts have been closed, in other situations that we have not seen them. Unfortunately, nationally, That is not the case. We've identified over 8,200 cases that have been filed in some way related to COVID. And also not, I guess, at least unfortunately.
Mr. Sultan, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but the 3-minute timer has run and I was not paying attention. I was listening to you and not paying attention, so I didn't give you a warning.
Well, I'm glad it was riveting, so I will quit. My testimony will come, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you all.
Thank you. Let's see if there are any committee member questions. Committee members, are there any questions? I actually have a question for you. What is the statute of limitations? And I know that for some medical related claims, there might be like a pre-trial, a pre-complaint filing, but what is the longest statute of limitations applicable to a claim that would be encompassed by the LD 1419?
The longest, well, as we said earlier, there'd be no change in the statute of limitations. So you're testing my memory, but the longest would be those involving children, because you get to extend that to some degree until age of majority, as I understand it, if I remember correctly. And otherwise, I think a notice of claim has to be filed within 2 or 3 years, and I'd have to go back and look on that.
Okay, that's actually, if you could email that information to us, that would be helpful.
I will. And then, of course, there are other types of claims, like, other tort claims that would go 6 years or longer. We've seen nationally that there were claims for intentional infliction of emotional distress around COVID, just being merely exposed to COVID. So there has been a fair amount of creativity nationally as to how to frame these potential claims against medical providers and so on.
Thank you. And I see that my colleague, Representative Thorne, also has a question for you. Go ahead, Representative Thorne.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Great minds think alike. Pretty much answered my question, Mr. Sultan, but you mentioned the 8,200 cases throughout the U.S. And I didn't know if you could give us the Reader's Digest version if you knew what types of cases these generally were.
Yeah, that would include all kinds of cases, both non-medical and medical cases. The information I looked at did not break down specifically by category of case, other than they were related to COVID issues. I think the bulk so far filed across the country have been employment related. I think you saw that in some of for example, in the chicken processing field or the cruise ship area, were early targets in the lawsuit world. That's kind of progressed over the year as we went through the pandemic. So that's all I have for you as far as detail.
Thank you. That helps. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, sure. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Sultan. Seeing no further questions, we'll move on to the next speaker, and that is Ms. Harvey McPherson, and you could begin your 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
Yeah, good morning, Senator Carney, Representative Harnett, and committee members. My name is Lisa Harvey McPherson, and I'm here today to speak in support of this bill on behalf of Northern Light Health. The first few months of the COVID-19 pandemic were truly unprecedented for our health system, as well as our colleagues across the state and across the nation. We approached the pandemic with a priority on safety for our patients and our employees, and every day our leaders, our clinicians, and our nurses performed to the best of their capacity to care for the citizens of Maine. In March, there were 3 key announcements: the U.S. Surgeon General, Governor Mills, and the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services, all directing that providers reduce, eliminate, or postpone non-essential services. We rapidly transformed our service delivery to a technology-based format, and thousands of patients received care at home from our providers, our hospice nurses, and our home care team. This allowed us to reduce the spread of COVID-19, maintain access for those who were the most ill among us, and allowed us to spread our scarce resources at that time in terms of our clinical teams as well as our protective equipment to support those in the greatest need. And we also know that delaying care delays diagnosis and will delay treatment for some individuals. We prepared for the worst case scenario. We knew how many ventilators we had. We knew how we would distribute them. We created models of community-based care hospitals if we didn't have enough beds in our acute care facilities. And as a health system, we determined how to transfer patients around our system to meet peak demand for services and maintain patient care, safety, and services. We didn't have to do a lot of that, but it doesn't mean that we don't have risk. Federally, the PrEP Act is a statute that provides immunity for administration of covered countermeasures during an emergency declaration, but we need the state support to provide protection from activities that were implemented during the pandemic that I've described. Now, many states have already acknowledged and acted upon state level protections. The National Conference of State Legislatures reports that at least 27 states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico have provided some level of immunity for healthcare workers, healthcare facilities, or both during the pandemic. So we ask that you join your colleagues in these other states and pass this important bill. And I have 15 minutes to spare. 15 seconds. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you, and thanks for being so efficient. Committee members, are there any questions for Ms. Harvey McPherson? Not seeing any questions for you. And your testimony your written testimony is already submitted. Is that right?
Yes,
Thank
it is.
you so much. Thank you. And next we have Mallory Shaughnessy. You can begin your testimony whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Actually, it's still good morning, Senator Carney, Representative Harnett, and esteemed members of the Joint Standing Committee on Judiciary. My name is Mallory Shaughnessy, and I'm a resident of Westbrook and the Executive Director of the Alliance for Addiction and Mental Health Services. On behalf of the member agencies of the Alliance and their hardworking frontline workers, clinicians, support staff, and leadership, I'm here to urge you to vote in support of LD 1419. This past 13 months has truly been like no other any of us have ever experienced. In a matter of weeks, behavioral health agencies completely reimagined themselves. They hung plastic sheets and installed plexiglass, rearranged furniture, cleaned, bought flip phones and data plans to give to clients for virtual appointments, learned about Microsoft Teams and how to Zoom, and created protocols for an entirely new way of providing these essential services for mental health and addiction. In residential facilities, staff reassured residents, encouraged them to wear their masks, sometimes struggling to get them to understand the importance of the new rules. They sought out personal protective equipment and in many cases ended up making it themselves due to shortages. For outpatient care, therapists sat in cars in parking lots or park benches in the cold to meet with clients because those clients wanted to still see the therapist face to face. They continue to go into people's homes and provide the supports needed to maintain stability and balance for children and adults in the community. And in all of this, there was the constant fear that you might get sick, you might bring it home to your loved ones, you might even die. Being such an unknown illness and unusual situation, the guidance was incomplete at all times. There would be changing directives weekly and sometimes daily, but everyone sought to adhere to the best information as it came. As an association of providers, we started meeting weekly on all different combinations, from residential providers, children's services, substance use services, specialized programs, all trying to stay a step ahead of the latest news and updates. The bottom line is that providers and their staff have done their very best under extreme circumstances for a very long time now. This bill responds in a very simple and fundamental way to these extraordinary conditions and limits any ability when healthcare providers followed all applicable guidance to the best of their ability. Please support this bill with a not to pass vote.
Thank you very much for providing the testimony today, Ms. Shaughnessy. Committee members, are there questions for Ms. Shaughnessy? Not seeing any. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And our next proponent is Laurie Belden, and I'm going to bring her over to the panel. And while she's moving through cyberspace, if there's anybody in the attendee space who wishes to be heard on this bill on LD 1419, please raise your electronic hand. And This is in support. So these are the supporters of 1419. Raise your hand and just leave it raised. And Ms. Belden, you can proceed when you're ready.
Great. Thank you so much. Senator Carney, Representative Harnett, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Judiciary. My name is Lori Belden, and I'm a resident of Durham, as well as the Executive Director of the Home Care and Hospice Alliance of Maine. We're a membership organization representing home care, home health care, and hospice providers across the state. I appreciate this opportunity to provide testimony in support of LD 1419 presented by Senator Moore. And this is my first time presenting to your committee, so it's nice to see all of you. And I joined when you guys started. You have some really good banter, so it's a good group of people. So thank you for having me. Our network of members deliver essential care across our state to older adults and disabled individuals of all ages, allowing them to stay in the comfort of their home and community. Annually, our providers report delivering care to more than 45,000 clients in their residence, traveling more than 20 million miles, and collectively they employ over 15,000 staff. COVID-19 pandemic has upended the entire healthcare delivery system in Maine. Older adults and individuals with underlying chronic health conditions continue to be at greater risk for complications and death from COVID-19. Since the start of the pandemic, much information has been reported about the impact on hospitals, nursing homes, and other residential care facilities. Less, however, has been reported on the statistics of COVID patients in the home. For over a year, Alliance members have been self-reporting to me their COVID census, both COVID positive patients as well as those that are anticipated to have COVID. Our data shows that home health and hospice providers serve more than 5 times as many patients as the hospitals across the state. Despite being on the front lines of care during the COVID emergency, Maine's home care, home health care, and hospice caregivers were invisible when Maine Emergency Management Agency, as well as the CDC, prioritized the distribution of personal protective equipment. Inadequate PPE in the home increased transmission risk for not only the home care worker and care recipient, but also other household members and visitors. All faced higher risk of contracting the virus. Generally, however, caregivers persevered and continued to provide this valuable care to their patients, feeling it was their duty to provide care during this really difficult time. Home care and home care, home health care, and hospice are essential services, particularly during the public health emergency. We can't afford to have healthcare providers inhibited by actions due to fear of litigation or liability. Implementing a limitation on civil liability for our providers will protect those who have been selflessly protecting us throughout the state of emergency, specifically when providing care in an environment where many conditions are beyond their control. The Alliance does recommend that we revise the definition to also expand to include registered home care providers, and it is in, I spelled that out in my testimony that I've already submitted. So I want to thank Representative Senator Moore for introducing this important legislation, and we urge the committee to vote yes and protect our healthcare providers during the state public health emergencies. Thank you.
Thank you. You hit 3 minutes right on the nose. I have a quick question for you, Ms. Belden.
Sure.
You said you requested that home care providers be included?
Yeah, so there is a
let me
clear
just ask you a question. Is that definition included somewhere in one of the main statutes?
Yes, and it's noted on my testimony where that would be.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Committee members, any additional questions? Not seeing any. Thanks for your testimony today. And Mr. Moran, you can begin your testimony, please.
Hi, good morning. Yes, good morning. My name is Dan Moran, Director of Communications and Government Affairs for the Maine Medical Association. I'm here to testify in support of LD 1419, an act to support healthcare providers during state public health emergencies. I'm not going to repeat things that have already been said. I'll just add a few comments. This bill, we believe, provides limited but necessary liability protection for healthcare providers against opportunistic COVID-19 lawsuits. It's been a trying and taxing, frustrating year for physicians across the state of Maine. They've had difficulty getting PPE. One of our members right down the road from the Capitol in Hollowell, a family practice physician, said that his PPE for most of the pandemic has consisted of Amazon when there's some available and duct tape when there isn't PPE available. They've been seeing their patients straight through despite the guidance that was given at the beginning of the pandemic. They've had severe business impacts associated with the pandemic. They're trying to get their patients vaccinated during this difficult time. Now that vaccinations are more widespread, it's becoming a bit easier, but it was a struggle at the beginning for them to get vaccines, let alone their patients. I'll add this part to it. I've had the pleasure of being on a number of calls on behalf of our members that Dr. Sears from Maine CDC has had. He's an epidemiologist. And when he would have these clinical calls, he would preface the clinical calls by saying, guidance for today is guidance for today. So take that and think about that for a second. Guidance was changing by the day for physicians and healthcare providers on the pandemic. Do this today, tomorrow, no, try this. No, don't do this, do this. So the standard of care varied so greatly. It's not a normal time in the provision of healthcare. Even Governor Mills, when the Johnson & Johnson news came out a week or two ago, said, we're trying to keep up with all the changes in the standard of care and changes in information and guidance, and we're working on it day to day, week to week. The average US physician can expect to have a lawsuit filed against them once every 7 years. And it's not just monetary, the issues facing them. The price they pay can cause more than just financial harm. It's their reputation. Their emotional health may be affected as well. And I can tell you, the emotional health of physicians is at a breaking point still to this day, and it has been throughout the pandemic. You think about lawsuits and you think about the court cases and what you see on TV and the back end of it. But the emotional stress and time commitment for a physician to address a lawsuit can be 36 months. That's the industry standard average between the time a physician receives a complaint to the time it's either adjudicated, a settlement is made, or the case is dismissed. So thank you very much for listening to us this morning. We appreciate your time. We appreciate what you do. We know you appreciate what physicians do, and we ask you to vote ought to pass on LD 1419.
Thank you very much. I see that we have some committee member questions. Let's go ahead, Senator Sanborn.
Thank you, Senator Carney. Thank you for being here, Mr. Moore. And you mentioned a couple of things with regard to the guidelines changing for treatment. And it seemed you were talking about the treatment of COVID or the use of vaccines. Those were the two examples that you gave. And I just wanted to ask if, aren't those types of countermeasures already immune from liability under the Federal PrEP Act? Anything related to a COVID treatment or a COVID vaccine would already be immune from liability under federal law. Isn't that true?
I'm not sure about the former. The latter, probably. The J&J issue is just more of a recent example of things that have changed and new guidance and studies that have come out that kind of flipped daily operations at physicians' offices on its head. But the first comment on Dr. Sears, that was all calls that have been taking place on a regular basis since last April. And I was just using the fact that he said guidance today is guidance for today. I'm not sure about the PrEP Act, but I'll find out more information about that.
Okay, Mr. Moore, just as a follow-up, when you say guidance for today, he was giving guidance with regard to how to treat COVID patients? Is that the type of guidance you're referencing?
Yeah, correct. So
okay.
They would have regular calls with clinicians, and he would go over New England Journal of Medicine articles, studies from other countries. But okay. I definitely used to put him on my communications to members, that direct quote from him, just to let the physician members know that we understand the trying times that they were under and the need to keep up with constantly changing guidance during a pandemic. So thanks. And hi to your dog, by the way. I appreciate it.
Okay, so are you looking for liability for physicians with regard to to the parameters for treating COVID? Or are you looking for immunity for providers who were treating other things?
Yeah, and I mean, that's a great question, and I should have brought that up because, you know, the guidance with delaying non-essential services and care, you know, cancer screenings, I think I did put it in my testimony. When you're delaying cancer screenings, other diagnostic surgical procedures, immunizations, I mean, there have been complaints filed nationwide. I don't know how much in Maine, but with licensing boards on physicians saying they told me that they weren't going to do my surgery or do my screening because they considered it non-essential. I consider it essential. So they've even have to face licensing issues. So some of this isn't directly related to COVID. It's directly related to the care that may or may not have been provided as a result of the guidance to limit elective or routine appointments too.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Senator Sanborn, and thank you, Mr. Moran. I think that's all the questions that we had for you. We appreciate you being here today.
Thank you.
And I just turned to the attendee space, and I see one more hand up, but I suspect that well, let me just say this. Is there anybody else who would like to testify in support of LD 1419? That is supporting testimony for LD 1419. We have one more person. And then everybody who would like to speak in opposition to 1419, please raise your electronic hands and leave them raised until after you've had a chance to speak. And welcome, Ms. Knopfsinger. If you can activate your audio and video and begin your testimony when you're ready.
Thank you very much. It's good to see you, Senator Carney.
And just to confirm, you're here in support of 1419?
No, I apologize. I thought you asked those who were opposing to raise their hands.
Well, your hand was up before I got to that, and I wasn't sure, but I think that there are no other supporting testimony. So now we'll switch, everybody. We're switching to opponents of 1419, and you can begin.
Okay, thank you, and sorry for my gaffe.
No, I was confused too. Go ahead.
So thank you all for hearing me here today. I serve on the governor's Judicial Selection Committee, and since I'm here, thank you very much for the work that you have done in pushing through the nominees and getting them on the bench. I am someone who has been working in the field of medical malpractice for my entire career. I began at Berman & Simmons more than 23 years ago. In those days, we did defense work primarily, and I represented respondent hospitals and doctors at that time. Since about the last 15 years, we no longer do that practice, and my practice is almost exclusively representing patients in medical negligence claims. I'd like to address right off the bat a few points that have been raised, and also to save Mr. Sultan from having to do his homework for you. The statute of limitations for medical malpractice in Maine is 3 years for adults. It is 6 years for minors unless they turn 18 during that period of 6 years, and then they end up having a shorter sort of moderate statute of limitations based upon their age. So that will save him from that work. And then I'd also like to address the concepts that have been raised by some of the speakers that are proponents of this bill. Among those concepts are that they have had to change the way that they practice medicine in light of the conditions of shortages of PPE, shortages of ventilators, shortages of blood supplies. What is missing in this analysis is that the law actually evaluates negligence claims in the circumstances in which the potential negligence arose. So for example, in the jury instructions that apply to how these cases go through the court system, there are emergency doctrines that essentially provide a different standard for evaluating a negligence claim when someone is acting under a state of emergency. So first, I would submit that the law, as it is already in place in the main jury instructions, actually covers some of the problems that they are raising here today. But I also want to speak here, and I think others will, about the quality of the cases or the cases that are brought and how they would be affected. I'd like to speak here because I have done some research in anticipation of this hearing. The Maine Superior Court keeps track of all medical negligence claims that are filed in the system, starting through with the notice of claim process, as well as those that later on go on to seek jury trials. To let you know how the system works, the panel hearing system, which I think folks have probably heard about before, is an onerous, difficult process for patients to win. Quite honestly, you not only have to prove negligence to prevail in those cases, you really have to bring it to the point where even the physician or healthcare provider on the panel would just reluctantly agrees. I'd like to let you know that in the past number of years, the average number of cases filed per year is 85. And in fact, case filings were down in 2020. They were down to 79. And to date this year, only 21 have been filed. So this honestly is not a problem that is existing in our current court system. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Knopfsinger. Committee members, are there any questions? Not seeing any. Did you provide your testimony in writing as well?
I did. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And the next person who will provide testimony is Taylor Asen. Move him over. Welcome, Mr. Asen. Go ahead with your testimony.
Thanks for having me, Senator Carney, Representative Hartnett, and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Taylor Asen. I'm attorney at Gideon Asen LLC, a law firm that specializes in medical malpractice. I want to begin by associating myself with the remarks of Attorney Knopfsinger, who I consider the best medical malpractice attorney outside of Gideon Asen LLC. I want to go back and just focus on something that Senator Sanborn and others have, Representative Moriarty and others have noted. This bill does not simply seek to immunize hospitals for care related to COVID-19. This bill, as it's written, immunizes hospitals for any care that is affected by COVID-19. And anybody who's been to a hospital in the last 14 months knows that that means all care. In other words, this is de facto blanket immunity for hospitals for any care provided in the last 14 months. Every year, thousands of Americans die as a result of medical error. That's well established. Many more are catastrophically injured because of medical errors. Lawsuits, while unpleasant, are a major deterrent against poor care. If we're looking to keep people safe during the pandemic, this isn't the right way to do it. As Attorney Knopfsinger pointed out, under certain circumstances, it may be unfair to expect hospitals to provide the same quality of care during the pandemic that they provided pre-pandemic. But we don't need an immunity provision to protect hospitals under these circumstances. At trial, medical malpractice defense attorneys can and will defend the care by pointing out the ways that they were constrained by COVID-19. And in certain circumstances, juries may agree that the care provided would have been unacceptable pre-pandemic, but is acceptable during the pandemic. The point is, this is an issue for juries to decide on a case-by-case basis after weighing all of the evidence about the reasonableness of the care provided. The right to civil jury trials is enshrined in the Maine Constitution, and there is no justification for abridging that right here, particularly because, as you just heard, there is no crisis in medical malpractice. We have between 70 and 85 cases filed a year. I'm happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you so much, Mr. Asen. Committee members, are there any questions? Go ahead, Senator Sanborn.
Thanks, Senator Carney, and nice to see you, Mr. Asen. My question is whether in evaluating cases that may have come to you in the last many months, you would use the context of the medical emergency that we're in in thinking through whether the case was likely to be successful or not, sort of anticipating that jury instruction that might come down the line?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Let me answer it by saying this. As many of you know, plaintiff lawyers work on contingency, meaning we don't get paid unless we recover for our clients. And we outlay the costs for these cases, which can be between $30,000 and hundreds of thousands of dollars. As Attorney Noxinger pointed out, these cases take years and years. They are aggressively defended. So the bottom line is, even irrespective of COVID, we take, at our firm at least, and I can speak to Berman and Simmons where I used to work, we take about 1% to 2% of the cases that come to us. And many of them, we believe there are valid negligence claims, but we nonetheless do not take them. So in COVID, of course, we understand that the public is sympathetic to, rightfully so, to doctors who are in a very hard situation. And we don't take close calls. We don't take them not because we're, as a business decision, because we understand that if we take a close call case that we may well lose, and we put $50,000 to $100,000 into it and lose, that's coming out of our pocket, and we will get no recovery for our client. So we take very, very seriously the selection process in these cases. We do not file them. That's why there's only 75 to 80 cases that are filed a year. So the idea that there are people out there filing ridiculous lawsuits to shake down hospitals is untrue on its face.
Thank you both very much. Senator Sanborn, are you all set? Great, thank you. Not seeing any other questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Asen, for being here today.
Thank you.
And you're welcome. Travis Brennan, you can please activate your audio and video and begin. And I'm just going to ask committee members, we are in a kind of a difficult situation. Representative Judera would like to present her bill, and she has to be at another presentation at noon. And so if we could hold off on questions to the next two witnesses and perhaps either do that at the work session or reach out to them and get answers to questions in writing, that would enable Representative Judera to present her bill today. And so with that, Mr. Brennan, if you could begin, please.
Great. Good morning, Senator Carney, Representative Harnett, members of the Joint Standing Committee on the Judiciary. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today and express my opposition to LD 1419. My name is Travis Brennan. I'm a partner at the law firm of Berman and Simmons. A significant part of what I do involves assisting Mainers throughout the state who have suffered negligent medical treatment. The Mainers with whom I have worked have experienced terrible injuries and unspeakable losses. And those truly are the cases that we pursue. We understand in Maine the standard is negligence, but we know as a reality, the burden often is much higher to be able to prevail in these cases. The representative examples of cases that I pursue involve a family whose son went into cardiac arrest and died because he was given the wrong medication in the hospital. A young mother whose cancer spread throughout her body because there was a long and unreasonable delay in diagnosis. A husband who died following a routine surgery in the hospital after repeated warning signs for an infection were overlooked. I worked with families from York County to Aroostook County and literally everywhere in between. My clients come from diverse backgrounds. They're loggers, lobstermen, teachers, carpenters, small business owners. They're Republicans, they're Democrats, independents, libertarians, and others. Unfortunately, in Maine, no one is immune from medical negligence. We oppose LD 1419 because it would essentially create blanket immunity from suits for medical negligence. In other words, it would protect the institutions and providers from accountability for the consequences of their substandard or negligent conduct, and leave the little person, who I represent, with no recourse or compensation for having to live with the consequences of the substandard conduct. What this means in real life terms is that this bill would shift the financial burdens, including medical expenses, lost wages, and suffering from the providers who, by the way, all have insurance for these exact situations, to the victims. The victims would go uncompensated. That means no money to replace lost income, no money to put wheelchair ramps in for patients who have lost limbs or who are paralyzed. It means no money for adaptive equipment and devices for a baby who's brain damaged. Beyond these individual victims, the limited number of cases that do proceed each year serve to ensure that providers follow quality care standards and protocols. I strongly urge you in this committee to vote against this bill. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brennan. And if we do have questions for you, we'll get them to you. We appreciate your understanding this morning.
Very good. Have a nice day.
You too. Mr. Joyce, you can activate your camera and your audio and start whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is, good morning, Senator Carney, Representative Harnett, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Judiciary. My name is Mark Joyce. I'm a managing attorney at Disability Rights Maine, Maine's protection advocacy organization for individuals with disability. And I come to speak in opposition of LD 1419. And I would echo a lot of what the other attorneys just said, who know way more than I do about the medical negligence and that sort of area. What I want to point out is that in Maine, according to the CDC, almost 22% of all Mainers have individuals with disabilities. And a large portion of those folks are individuals who receive Maine Care and who are on Maine Care for services. And when I looked at the bill, the definitional section almost reads like a Maine Care, sort of list of providers that would be included in a lot of the services that individuals with disabilities are receiving. And so when I look at this bill, what I want to focus on is that it really is a change in the standard of care, which the attorneys talked about earlier, in terms of like going from the negligent standard of care, where they talked about, you can't take circumstances into consideration, to this wanton, reckless standard, which is what it essentially would be changing it to for all of these people with disabilities who are receiving these services and really depend upon a lot of the services they're getting. And the numbers the numbers are fairly large. OBH, Office of Behavioral Health, they report that in 2020, they almost served 70,000 people, adults with serious and persistent mental illness. So when you're talking about changing these standards of care, it's not just for individuals who are bringing malpractice sort of lawsuits. It's for this entire community of individuals with disabilities who are relying on the Maine Care system for that type of standard of care, so that they can, live their lives the most independently and the most the way that they want to. And so I'll make it brief, and I'll just echo what the other attorney said, and I'll end my comments there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Joyce, and appreciate you being really efficient with your remarks today. Did you provide written testimony as well?
Yes, I did.
Great, thank you so much. With that, we have heard from everybody who either registered in advance or who raised their electronic hand with regard to LD 1419. And so we will close the hearing on LD 1419. And Representative Dudera is here, and we know that you are Zooming through cyberspace today. And so we're just going to welcome you and ask you to begin your presentation as we open the work session on, the public hearing on LD 1399, an act to provide for remote notarization. You may begin, Representative Dudera.
Thank you very much, Senator Carney, and welcome everybody. I'm sorry, I hope I'm not rushing you, but I do have to present something at noon. So Senator Carney told me she'd make it happen, and she's making it happen. So greetings, Senator Carney, Representative Hartnett, and distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Judiciary. I'm Vicki Dudera. I represent House District 94, which includes Camden, Islesboro, and Rockport. I'm here to present LD 1399, an act to provide for remote notarization. Notarization is the assurance by a duly appointed and impartial notary public that a document is authentic, that the signature is genuine, and that its signer acted without duress or intimidation and intended the terms of the document to be in full force and effect. Mark Twain was once a notary, and so was Shakespeare. And the origins of notarization can be traced back to ancient Egypt. Remote notarization and online notarizations are concepts that reflect the modernization of this centuries-old process. In simplified terms, remote notarization uses telecommunications technology for a notary to observe a person executing a physical document. Online notarization is the same process, but the document is electronic rather than physical. The benefits are many. Sometimes it's inconvenient or impossible for people to convene together physically due to time or travel constraints. Buyers and sellers of real estate may be located in different places, and requiring their physical presence for notarizations can unnecessarily complicate and delay transactions. That example kind of applies to my own day job in real estate, but the applications are many: financial transactions, corporate governance, trusts and estates, and so on. And so for these reasons, many states have modernized their notary laws to allow for remote and/or online notarizations, but Maine unfortunately has not. And that brings us to LD 1399. And I know you heard a couple of other bills earlier. LD 1399 will allow this process in Maine, and to date, the only remote notarization in our state has occurred under the governor's executive order allowing limited remote notarization during the pandemic. So I submitted this bill as a starting point for discussions to finally adopt this process after seeing what my constituents were going through as COVID-19 infiltrated our lives. An elderly couple wanted urgently to update their wills, and their attorney reached out to me asking what to do. A young family needed to move, but their house sale was in jeopardy without the services of a notary. The governor's executive order did take care of these predicaments and others throughout the state, but the numerous calls that I received from panicked Mainers and the inconvenience to many professionals in my district made me determined to bring this measure forward. The text of the bill is model language that's endorsed by the National Association of Realtors, and I'm pleased to say that the bill has achieved its goal of facilitating discussions, many discussions, among interested parties, including attorneys, bankers, credit unions, and realtors. During the course of those discussions, however, it's become clear that while consensus supports adoption of remote online notarization in Maine, the specifics of how we do that need more time to be worked out. For that reason, and with the support of numerous stakeholders, I am proposing an amendment to LD 1399, which I did send to your clerk. And this amendment does three things. First, it extends the governor's executive order through next year. So limited remote notarization will continue beyond the state of emergency. Second, it directs the Secretary of State to convene a working group of stakeholders to iron out the language and report back to you by February 1st, 2022. And third, it asks your committee to report out a bill to implement the working group's suggested language. So even without something as extreme as a pandemic, our state will be well served by modernizing the ancient practice of notarization by moving towards a remote online model. And I urge you to pass LD 1399 as amended. So thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and there will be some more people speaking about this as time goes on.
Thank you so much, Representative Dudera. Committee members, are there any questions for Representative Dudera? I am not seeing any, which is probably good in light of the fact that you need a minute to get through cyberspace to your other presentation. We will have an opportunity, committee members, to ask questions of other witnesses. So thank you very much, Representative Dudera.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody.
You too. Um, all right, committee members, we are going to start to hear the proponents of LD 1399. And actually, I guess let me turn to you, Representative Moriarty, because I know that you also introduced a similar legislation, an act concerning the revised uniform law on notarial acts. And that's LD 904, which is currently a concept draft. Did you wish to just give a little introduction to your concept draft before we move into taking the comments on 1399? Because I think the comments are going to be the same on both bills.
Yes, Madam Chair, I think they probably will. I was asked by the National Uniform Laws Commission to introduce and sponsor LD 904. I do not have professional experience in this area of the law, and so I am simply fulfilling more or less a ministerial act by my introduction and sponsorship of the act. But this is one of three comparable provisions with which we're dealing here this morning. I was on the line earlier during our public hearings with Paul Chaikin, who has testified before us before and is a member of the one of three members of the Maine Uniform Law Commission. Paul, in turn, has been in touch with Peggy and with other folks involved with Representative Dara's bill and Senator Bailey's bill. And I understand that the parties are approaching agreement and have made substantial progress in coming up with a single matter for our consideration. So I would defer to my colleague and for further elaboration and explanation of where we stand at this point.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate that, Representative Moriarty.
Certainly.
And so with that, I'll turn to those who are in the attendee space and ask those who wish to testify in support of LD 1399 to raise your virtual hand and keep it raised. And then please include, if you're here on 904 as well, please kind of wrap your remarks on 904 into 1399. And hang on one second here. And so we'll start. I'm going to bring in Mr. Cashman first. And let him. Welcome back to the panel, Mr.
Thank you.
Cashman.
Nice to see you all again. Can you hear me all right?
We can. Go ahead.
Okay, great. You never know when you go through that little tunnel. Well, good afternoon now, Senator Carney and members of the committee. It's nice to see everybody again. Here on behalf of my client, Maine Association of Realtors, in strong support of LD 1399. And I would say as well, you know, the other bills as well that are on point around remote notarization. This is something that has been being rolled out across the country and increasingly so during this pandemic, has just highlighted the need for being able to still continue with real estate transactions despite people being at distances, either for health reasons or logistic reasons. And so we appreciate Representative Dudera putting the bill in. I think maybe I could be most constructive in just outlining the process about how we got to this amendment. So we had a very constructive, have had a number of constructive meetings with the stakeholders, and we had a great meeting with the Secretary of State's office and her staff to sort of, I think that my client's position, and I think it's a shared position with all the other stakeholders that I've spoken with, the agreement seems to be that we really want to move forward with doing this, but we need to do it in a way that's going to work not only for the Secretary of State in terms of implementation, but out, you know, in the field as well, if you will. And so for that reason, it's important that everybody is comfortable with it. So we had a great meeting, very constructive with the Secretary of State's office, and they had some internal discussions. I know they'll speak to their process, but we appreciate that this is a big thing for them and their commitment to working on developing this in Maine. But obviously more time is needed for that. And in the amendment that I believe you have in front of you from Representative Dudera, we've articulated all of the different interest groups that I've spoken with and representatives of those associations that are all interested in being a part of this process. And they can speak for themselves. I don't speak for them, but I can just speak to that process. I think everybody's in agreement that this is the right direction to move forward with, and we certainly are as well. So the only sticking point is this issue that the current provisions of the executive order, we don't want to see those lapse because they're not being used as very much in real estate transactions, but they are being used in other areas, trust and estates and so on. And so we want to make sure that we don't take a step backwards while this process is being worked out. That's why continuing the provisions of the executive order are very important. We've been in touch with, or I've been in touch with the governor's office as well in terms of the proper way to do that. We've spoken with Peggy as well, and we're happy to work through the proper way to carry on those provisions. I see my time is short, so I'm going to conclude it there. I'll just say that we look forward to this process and to continuing to work with the committee, hopefully next session, following the delivery of the report that the stakeholder process will work through. Happy to answer any questions. I don't want to take over more time, so thank you for your time.
Excuse me. Thank you very much, Mr. Cashman. And I do know that you have put a lot of effort into pulling together the stakeholders and finding a really terrific path forward. And I just want to express my thanks to you for doing all of that hard legwork on this matter.
Thank you, Senator Carney. I appreciate that.
Committee
and I would just say that it is a team effort. So I've had a lot of discussions, but those discussions are always with somebody else. So there's always a lot of people involved in this, and we appreciate their commitment as well. But thank you. Good
point. Yes, thanks to everyone. Committee members, are there any questions for Mr. Cashman? Not seeing any. So next I'll bring in the Secretary of State, and I'm going to move a couple of folks.
Thank you.
In. Thank you. Whoops. Oh, here we go. Sometimes people move around on the electronic list and I click on the wrong person. Good afternoon, Secretary of State Bellows. Welcome to your old committee, the Judiciary Committee. We're going to keep you to a 3-minute time frame. So go ahead.
Thank you, Senator Carney, members of the Judiciary Committee. It's nice to see some of you again. I am Secretary of State Shanna Bellows, here to testify in support of LD 1399, and our testimony also supports LD 810 and LD 904. One of my main goals as Secretary of State is to leverage and invest in new technologies to make processes simpler and more convenient for Mainers. And we are excited about the possibilities of remote and electronic notarization. Our office has already begun research in other states. We're looking into what the available technologies are. We're mindful that the technologies are changing very quickly. We know that states who've adopted this are finding out that there are new things and new changes to be made. But we think this is really important. We recognize that the Maine Notary Public's role in remote online transactions would differ significantly from traditional notarizations, which still require that personal appearance and signing in ink. But we're excited about this amendment because we believe it will allow us to do the research that is needed to do. It will allow us to get this right. We want to look into not only the technology, but standards, requirements, processes, and training for notaries public, as well as new system development. We are mindful that it will also change the responsibilities of our office and the role of the Notary Public in Maine. We don't take that lightly. One thing that we do think that it will be important is that as we move forward with remote and electronic notarization, that we build it on a solid foundation. It would be important to update Maine's existing notary laws. We would encourage the committee to consider adopting some or all of the provisions of the revised Uniform Law on Notarial Acts, also known by the acronym as RELONA, as well as subsequent amendments to create a really solid foundation for this as we move forward with modernization and move forward with implementing remote and electronic notarization. So we appreciate the stakeholders' work with us on the amendment that was presented today by Representative Dudera, and we are very willing and excited to work with stakeholders from all communities to make sure that as we move forward, we do this right in a way that protects the integrity of the process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary of State Bellows. I see that there are some committee members with questions. Representative Thorne, you can proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome, Secretary of State Bellows, to the Judiciary Committee. We appreciate your coming by today and helping us understand this bill a little better. My question is to you, what limitations do you see in utilizing remote notarization? Obviously, there's glaring benefits to it, but what do you see as possibly some of the drawbacks to overcome?
So I think that we want to honor the process of the notary public and make sure that we're protecting the integrity of the transactions that are being conducted. We don't want to put forward processes that result in, for lack of a better word, robo-notarization, right? We want to make sure that we protect the integrity of the process itself. And I would be happy to make the Director of Corporations or our Deputy Director, Julie Flynn or Kathy Bowden, available for the work session. They're truly experts. They've been working for decades in this area, overseeing Maine's notary publics and the training that we provide, and could go into some specific detail. But I think fundamentally, it comes down to making sure that we're protecting the integrity of the process.
Thank you. As a notary public, I appreciate that that encouragement, and we'll look forward to working with them on that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Committee members, are there any additional questions for the Secretary of State on these three bills? And we looped in the one that Secretary of State Bellows referred to that I hadn't mentioned is the next bill, an act to amend the law regarding advanced healthcare directives. It's LD 1144. Go ahead, Representative Babbage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I couldn't resist the opportunity, Madam Secretary. Thanks for being here. I guess I wanted just to ask, in going forward, I have not looked closely at the governor's order regarding remote, and actually I hope that Peggy might be able to provide that to us at some point. Excuse me. But I'm interested just knowing that acknowledgements and jurats and affidavits have always required in person, and the latter two in person, no exceptions. You know, I guess I'm wondering if we're approaching here something that's similar to an executive session being done remotely. Is there any concern about coercion or off-camera influence or things of that sort that may? I'm trying to decipher through potentialities regarding remote affidavits and so forth. So I wondered if you'd had any discussions in the office about that.
So two things on this. One, first and foremost, I think what is attractive about the amendment is it creates a working group and a process to do the research and create a plan that we would bring back to this committee, where we would definitely need to thoroughly explain and explore all of these questions. Electronic notarization is electronic signatures, but still the same requirements. Remote notarization is what the governor's office allows, which is where the notary is not physically present in the same room. So those are the questions we would explore in this study. So, and yeah.
Thank you both. Any additional questions?
Thank you.
I am not seeing any. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Okay, and now, so I'm looking at the attendee space and asking everybody who wishes to testify, and actually we'll make it applicable to all of the remaining bills, 1399, 1144, which amends the healthcare directive statute, but only with respect to execution. And then 904, if you're here as a proponent to any of those three bills, please raise your electronic hand and keep it raised. And we'll start to hear from folks. And Mr. Whalen, you can activate your audio and video and begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you again, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'll be brief. Thank you all for all of your work this morning and now into the afternoon. I am speaking on behalf of NAMIC in support of the remote notarization provisions. And I think it's long overdue, a long overdue modernization that will benefit Maine consumers. And I would just add, because others have spoken very articulately about the merits of this bill, to date, there are 31 states that have adopted some form of remote notarization, and legislation is currently pending in most, if not all, of the other states. This will be a consumer-friendly and cost-effective alternative. I think the one thing we have taken away from COVID, among the many lessons that we have learned and will learn, is that we do have both the necessity and the technology that warrants implementing a permanent remote notarization process. And with that, I thank the Madam Chair and the committee, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Whalen. Are there any questions on the part of the committee? Not seeing any. We appreciate you being here today.
Thank you.
And, next, we'll go to Robin Watts, and Ms. Watts, you can proceed when you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairperson Carney and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Judiciary. My name is Robin Watts, and I serve as the State Counsel for First American Title Insurance Company in Maine. First American Title is a national title insurance company, but we work with we have a local office in South Portland, Maine, and we work with small businesses, about 200 small businesses here in Maine, consisting of title companies and real estate lawyers. Among those others who are testifying today, First American Title Insurance Company is very interested in remote online notary laws, because notaries are a linchpin of our system of real estate conveyancing and recording those documents, deeds and mortgages. I've provided written testimony to the committee, so I won't go into any significant detail here today. I know that your time is limited, but I did just want to appear before you to let you know that I've provided some written testimony which does discuss a few of the pitfalls associated with remote online notarization and ways in which those things can be addressed through legislation, so that we have a safe and secure means of providing that service online. And I also just wanted to say that I support the amendment to LD 1399. I think that's a good path forward at this time, because it addresses both our immediate need to have some form of remote notarization by extending the governor's executive order for remote ink signed documents and notarization of ink signed documents. And it also puts together a group of stakeholders to who will be able to vet the various issues associated with remote online notarization and bring back what we hope will be a good bill that everybody can live with next session. That being said, I'd be happy to volunteer my time and energy to the work group process if that is, once that is put together. So thank you for your time and consideration, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you very much. Committee members, are there any questions for Ms. Watts? Not seeing any. Thanks for your time and your testimony today. And we'll move on to Timothy Reiniger, and you can go ahead and begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Senator Carney, and you are my senator. We have the privilege of having you as our senator here in Cape Elizabeth, and thank you, committee members today. So I'm one of the causes for all this discussion because I was one of the authors of the first such bill in Virginia, 2011, and testified at that time in Virginia. And what's remarkable is this discussion today is very similar to the same discussions with the members of the General Assembly in Richmond, and the questions about duress, robo-signing, and elder citizens and so forth. So these are great questions. And I'm happy to say that, as has been reported by the prior speaker, since Virginia in 2011, now about almost 34 states have the law. There have been hundreds of thousands of online notarizations performed out of Florida, Texas, all the other states, and not one legal challenge, not one legal challenge. And in the discussions in Virginia in 2011, the legislators realized, with the audio video recording, that will prevent fraudsters. And in a subsequent dispute, that will be the best possible evidence. You won't rely on the memory of a notary who may or may not have a journal because it's optional in Maine. It'll be the audio video recording. And I think that experience has been borne out, and that's why there hasn't been a single legal challenge. So it is, as they realize in Virginia, an outstanding consumer protection bill. And, a lot of people think of it as another tech bill and all that. It's really about consumer protection, and it's outstanding. It's been proven. And just another quick note on the various bills which have been so thoughtfully put forward here and that will be studied by Secretary Bellows and her committee. As it started with the Virginia model, and then Texas followed that, Montana and a few others, looking for a way to just add authorization for online notarization into the existing statutes. Subsequently, 2018 or so, the Uniform Law Commission said, boy, this is getting such popularity that we should look at this and add it to our Uniform Law and Notarial Acts. And so I had the privilege of being on that committee as an American Bar Association appointee, legal advisor, I should have said that. So I'm here speaking in that capacity as the advisor. And so you have the Uniform Law Commission option. So one would be if you want to have the ability to drop into your existing statutes the ability to authorize the online notarization. That would be Representative Dudera's original version. Or if you want to take the opportunity, as Secretary Bellows now is recommending, to take the opportunity to look at all the notary statutes and maybe update them to add things like a seal requirement, a journal requirement. And also I would urge preserving some of the really unique aspects of the Maine law of authorizing notaries, attorneys to have notarial powers. And also there are marine protests. It's one of 2 states in the country with marine protests. I did speak with admiralty lawyers who still would like to use that and see great possibilities. With their issues of seafarers out on ships and all who have to do protests and so forth, to be able to use an online version would be incredible. So thank you for your time. I'd be happy to be a resource to any of you if you have a great interest in the specifics of online notarization, and happy to be here in Maine to help all of you are crafting a great bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing the history of the remote notary acts with us. We really appreciate that. That's super helpful. It's good to see you. Thanks for being here today.
Sure.
And we'll move on to our next, the next speaker is Mr. Excuse me, we have a question from Representative Babbage. Thank you for flagging me down.
Just a quick one, Madam Chair. Mr. Reiniger, is that right?
Yes.
Could you tell me if the Uniform Law Commission has a model remote that is similar or not from the original bill proposed in 1399?
Yes, yes, it has the same principles and of consumer protection. Because I think it came out of Mr. Cashman's, one of his clients, real property industry realtors. Right. It has other provisions specifically addressing electronic recording and the acceptance of a paper printout of electronic document, which the Uniform Law Commission has as an entirely separate act. So that would be recommended. So yes, and by the way, Representative Babbage, you had mentioned about the duress issue. That was one of the issues that came up in Virginia about what if there's a gun to the head? Someone has a gun. Yeah, and that's great. And they realized, the fact is that the paper world, there could be people outside, someone could have driven the signer in a car, they have a gun, they're telling him, sign, you better go in there and sign it. Or there are unfortunately many ways to pressure people in the paper world, as we know in life. But with the camera, you can just pan the room and see who else is in the room.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks for the question and for the answer. Now we'll move on to the next person who signed up to testify, and that is Kennard Jones. And you can go ahead and activate your audio and video and proceed as soon as you're ready.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Good morning, Chair Carney and distinguished members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Kennard Jones. I'm the Government Affairs Analyst for Notarize. Notarize is a digital trust provider, a platform that integrates technology with live human interaction to establish identities. We offer digital identity proofing and authentication services, including a market-leading notary public platform to allow any person, organization, to get their documents notarized online 24/7. As a sophisticated digital identity platform, we do not allow filters. Access to digital services is more important than ever. And at Notarize, we applaud the committee's consideration of remote online notarization legislation to ensure it works not only for consumers, but also attorneys, notaries, and all industries in Maine. We support efforts to pass remote online notarization, which allows a signer and a notary to conduct notarizations remotely through multi-factor authentication and live audio-visual technology to record the session. RON was built with fraud prevention in mind, and with 33 states passing permanent RON, laws have been enacted with thoughtful coordination between government, notaries, and industries. The global pandemic has accelerated both the demand and the need for consumer and businesses to access digital services. As such, Notarize thanks the committee for holding this hearing and for providing leadership to the consumers and businesses of Maine. We look forward to being a trusted partner with Maine legislators, Secretary of State, and other leaders as this process continues. If and when appropriate, we are happy to be a technology vendor resource to you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. Committee members, are there any questions? Not seeing any. Thanks for providing your testimony today.
Thank you.
And next we'll hear from Ellen Parent from the Maine Credit Union League.
Good afternoon, Senator Carney and members of the Committee on Judiciary. I won't burden you with my written testimony. I have submitted it. But I'm here on behalf of the Maine Credit Union League to support this bill as well as all of the remote notary bills. As many of you are likely aware, credit unions provide notary services as an ancillary product to our members, but also in our general course of business. So we greatly appreciate the efforts of the governor's office to provide us with the executive order during the emergency, The executive order has some flaws, and we'd certainly like to remedy those when we create a more permanent situation for electronic notary. We are happy to support the amendment that was proposed and really put together by Mr. Cashman, and we are happy to be part of this process as we look to update Maine's notary laws and particularly adopt a form of remote and online notary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Parent. Is your written testimony filed?
It is. It is. I only filed it once. It is attached to LD 810.
Great. And then another question is, you had referred to some concerns you had with the current executive order. Are those outlined in the written information you provided?
They are not, but I can briefly summarize if you'd like.
Let's do.
So the way the written order was, the executive order was created, in essence, it allowed for remote notarization, but the timing was unusual. There wasn't a recorded component, which, as you've heard from others, is important in this remote world. This really ended up being notarization by mail, which was not terribly convenient for any of the parties involved. And so we would certainly look for something that is more comprehensive and is, it was a perfect, stopgap measure when we needed something in place, but it was a little unwieldy, and a lot of our credit unions were uncertain about how to best administer it. What ended up happening is most of our credit unions did eventually go to, if you needed something notarized, you could make an appointment, especially once we had a better sense of what the pandemic conditions were. And we were also notarizing things through sort of our drive-up windows to best protect our members and our employees.
Thank you. And that's a pretty creative workaround. Thank you. We appreciate your being here today. Committee members, are there any questions for Ms. Parent? Not seeing any. Once again, thank you. And next we'll have Paul Chaikin. And Mr. Chaikin, whenever you're ready, you can activate your audio and video and proceed.
I think I've, excuse me, I think I've, can you hear me yet?
We can hear you just fine. I'm going to
be very brief. I have provided written comments. They were attached to 904. We are, excuse me for not saying thank you, Madam Chair, but we are supportive of adoption of either 810 or 904 and 1399 as amended. We want to express our appreciation for the work that was done by Representative Dodera, Secretary Bellows and her staff, Mr. Cashman, Representative Moriarty. The Uniform Law Commission stands ready to assist in every way possible so that Maine can work its way through the update and revisions to notarial laws here in Maine. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chaikin. I did want to note you've been before our committee fair amount this session in connection with uniform laws, and wanted to express appreciation to you for all the work you're doing in that capacity. Committee members, are there any questions for Mr. Chaikin? Not seeing any. Thank you once again for appearing today. And next we'll have Kathy Kanaboros. And Kathy, Ms. Kanaboros, if you can go ahead and proceed when you're ready.
Okay, can you hear me okay? Yes. Good afternoon, Senator Carney and distinguished members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Kathy Kanaboros. I'm a resident of Hollis, and I'm here today representing the Maine Bankers Association. And first, the Maine bankers would like to thank the sponsors of all 3 notary bills for introducing their legislation. This is an important issue, and we look forward to working with stakeholders on it. We have reviewed the amendment that was posted online today for LD 1399, and we do support it. That's really all I have. The amendment would push this to a study, and we do support that. I want to thank you for allowing me to testify today.
Thank you.
Short and simple.
Short and sweet. Thank you so much. And did you provide written testimony on any of the bills?
I did not. We were in favor of the concept of all 3 of them, but because 810 and 904 were concept drafts, we usually don't submit written testimony on those. And I had heard that there was an amendment coming on LD 1399. So we decided to just do verbal testimony today.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for being here and providing your input. And that brings us to James Cohen. And Mr. Cohen, you can proceed whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jim Cohen. I'm a resident of Portland, a proud constituent of Senator Sanborn, and I am here today on behalf of the Maine State Bar Association. We have submitted written testimony under Kelly McDonald's name, he's the president of our Board of Governors. Our testimony is in support of LD 904, and we were neither for nor against 810 and 1399, but essentially our testimony is in support of the proposal that Representative Dudera presented earlier. We've had an opportunity to work with just about every person who has spoken to you here this afternoon. I particularly want to call out Mr. Chaikin for all of his diligence on behalf of the Uniform Law Commission. The reason we had highlighted LD 904 is that our board particularly liked the approach of a uniform law in the sense of Representative Moriarty's bill. We are very happy and have thus far been willing and played a facilitative role. We have many sections of our association with a strong interest in having a successful remote notarization process. And a year ago, we worked with a number of groups, including some of the ones you've seen here today, and working with the governor's office to put in place the temporary remote notarization process that we have now. And I think when we've had some of our meetings in the past, I learned from a number of practitioners that the existing system, while helpful, it got us through the pandemic, it's getting us through the pandemic, that there are opportunities for improvement. So we look forward to being part and helpful to the discussions over the course of the next number of months. And hope that we can have something good to present back to this committee next year to move forward with. So I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cohen. Committee members, any questions? Not seeing any. Thank you for being here this afternoon.
Thank you so much. Be well.
And Ms. Harvey McPherson has already activated her audio and video and is ready to go. You can proceed, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Carney and committee members. Before I start, I want to check that I am in the right queue. I'm going to be speaking in support of 1144, the bill regarding advanced healthcare directives. That's in the stack of bills that you're accepting testimony on, correct?
It absolutely is. And
okay, great. I think
that.
I'm the first one to speak in support of that bill. Okay, Good afternoon, Senator Carney, committee members. My name is Lisa Harvey McPherson, and I am here on behalf of Northern Light Health, speaking in support of this bill. I want to thank Representative Roeder for sponsoring this legislation. We reached out to her based on our experience during COVID-19. It's important to understand that this bill would be related to any infectious disease. I will refer to it in the context of COVID-19 because we learned a lot about this challenge. What we experienced is patients with COVID who are on isolation precautions. Everything in their room is contaminated. Staff must be heavily protected to enter in and out of their room. And these individuals didn't have advanced directives or living wills, and they wanted to execute those documents during their hospital stay. The challenge became that physical document, once entered into the room, became a contaminated item. So the bill before you today would allow an individual to designate someone to sign that advanced directive or living will document and allow for remote witness participation. So we're not changing anything to do with the structure of advanced directives or living wills, simply the process by which the document could be executed for an individual with an infectious disease. And that's the purpose of this legislation.
Thank you very much. And thank you for indicating that you're speaking to this particular bill. That was a helpful clarification. Committee members, are there any questions? I am not seeing any questions for you. Thank you once again. Appreciate you being here today.
Thank you.
And we have the next person who'll be speaking is Nick Batista, but I just want to turn to those in the attendee portion of the meeting and ask if there's anybody else who wishes to speak with regard to any of the remote notarization bills. That includes 1144, 1399, and 904. And then also the bill we started out with today, which I think was 810. Please raise your electronic hand and leave it raised so that I can bring you over to the panel. And Mr. Batista, thank you so much for joining us. You can begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Carney, Representative Harnett, members of the committee. My name is Nick Batista, and I'm offering this testimony on behalf of the Island Institute in support of the general ideas motivating LD 1399 and the other remote notarization bills. We're a 38-year-old nonprofit organization based in Rockland. We do community development work that's focused on the marine economy, climate and energy work, supporting small businesses, education and leadership. Broadband is foundational to all of our work, and we strongly believe that all Mainers need to have the ability to use high-speed, reliable internet. We regularly do our work in small remote communities that are logistically challenging to get to. And so as an organization, we try to support efforts like this that make life a little bit easier for people who live in these communities. And really efforts that enable residents of our smallest and most remote communities to access resources similarly to those of us who live on the mainland. Transportation to and from some of these communities can be costly and time consuming. One community member from Frenchboro, which is a small island about 8 miles off of Mount Desert Island, noted that because of the ferry schedule, going to shore to conduct just about any kind of business costs $50. It takes an overnight, so he's got to get a hotel room, or maybe two nights, depending on the timing of appointments. And then there's the costs of food and everything else while you're away from home. If you have a family, if you need to figure out childcare logistics or bring your entire family over, things start getting complicated pretty quickly. So any opportunities to reduce trips to the mainland through using modern technology is much appreciated. I think it is worth saying our understanding is that most islands do have at least one notary on them. I think many have more, but sometimes people have to go off for groceries or visit their doctor, or maybe they want to take a vacation. And these are also very small communities. So if you have 40 people in your community, we wonder if people are hesitant to go and approach somebody else to notarize sensitive documents in their community. And so remote notarization is a tool that could make life easier for island communities. We don't have a lot of insider expertise to bring to bear on how this actually happens, but just want to say that it would be important to do something. So support the amendment that Representative Dodaro offered at the beginning of the hearing.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Batista? Not seeing any. We appreciate you being here today.
Thank you.
And now I owe a big apology to Representative Roeder. Representative Roeder, completely skipped over your bill, and I am very embarrassed. I apologize. Welcome to the Committee on the Judiciary. We're delighted to have you here this afternoon and would really appreciate hearing your bill presentation.
Sure, thank you so much. And no worries, everybody's got a lot of work on their plates today. So good afternoon now, Senator Carney, Representative Harnett, and distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on the Judiciary. My name is Amy Rader, and I represent House District 125, which includes a portion of Bangor. Here to present LD 1144, an act to amend the law regarding advanced healthcare directives. This bill seeks to clarify rules set in place for healthcare providers as we navigate healthcare in a world so vastly changed by pandemic. I was approached by the folks at Northern Light Health to submit this bill because they've been working diligently to honor their patients' wishes regarding advanced healthcare directives and powers of attorney for healthcare, while also trying to uphold laws written before global pandemics and telemedicine were brought so closely together in the past year. This bill simply allows for a patient's representative to sign an advanced care directive or power of attorney for healthcare either remotely at a safe distance from an infected or potentially infected patient. I would venture to say that many, if not all, healthcare providers in the state have had to deal with this situation and have made the best decisions that they could given limited guidance by current law. One thing that I'd like to mention apart from my testimony is that I did see some of the opposing testimony, which seems to confuse this with some sort of overhaul of the advanced care directive system. It is not, it's just allowing someone who's not physically present in the room with somebody who's infected with COVID-19, which would be terrible, to sign the advanced care directives for the patient. So that is all this law chooses to do. I put it in as an emergency measure because it seems like something that needs to be taken care of very quickly. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but I know that there are people coming after me who can speak much more eloquently to the legal aspects thereof.
Thank you very much, Representative Roeder. And can I just ask you, Ms. Harvey McPherson has spoken. Who else do you believe is here to speak specifically to 1144?
I believe there is another, hang on one second, I'll tell you in just a second. I'm looking at the testimony online.
Yeah, I'll look at
it. And I
it.
believe it was Maine Med. Wait, no, sorry, Maine Health. Sarah Calder had submitted testimony, I believe.
Okay, yeah, and I think that her testimony is just in writing.
Yeah, yeah. And as someone who has a hospital in her district, St. Joseph's, I didn't reach out to them to see if they concur, but Northern Light is also in Bangor and their wishes seemed more than reasonable and more than understandable, which is why I put in the bill.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Committee members, are there questions for the bill sponsor? Not seeing any. So again, with apologies and also thanks. We appreciate you being here today.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to leave and go back to labor and housing, but I appreciate being able to be in front of you today. Thank you.
Thank you. And that brings us, I believe, to our the final person speaking in favor of any of these three LDs, 904, 1144, or 1399. And that is Leo Delicata. And Mr. Delicata, you can begin your testimony whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Senator Carney. I do not see my video coming up.
I think I have a way to prompt you from this end of cyberspace. I don't know if that will work, but
all right. There we go.
All right.
Thank you, Senator Carney and members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Leo Delicata. I work for Legal Services for the Elderly, and I live in Portland, Maine. And I'm actually testifying neither for nor against these bills because on 904 and 1399, I suspected strongly that you would have a study commission and or a study group. And that we would participate in that group. I haven't seen the amendment, but the amendment sounds like a good idea, and certainly hope that we would be invited to join this group. And with respect to 908 or 9810, it was a concept draft, and so there was nothing to be said concretely about it. 1144, we testify neither for nor against, but we want to point out to you that we think that it is controlled by the executive order in place. And I have submitted testimony on 1144. I don't know whether you have it because I submitted it this morning, but in the testimony, I've provided links to the executive orders. And I think that Representative Babbage wanted to see the executive orders. I would, if you can find the few minutes that it takes, I would ask all of you to read that executive order. It's honestly very comprehensive, and it's a very good order. And it provides some basic safeguards, including a recording necessary for these kinds of remote notarizations. I just think that I'm heartened to hear that as part of the plan, this executive order will continue until we have something more substantive. And Representative Thorne, I wanted to also tell you that within the executive order, I heard your question this morning about whether it applied to everybody. It does, but there's one section of the order, and I'll read it. It says the notary and any witness, and this has to do with wills and powers of attorney. So for wills and powers of attorney, the notary or at least one witness must be an attorney licensed to practice law in the state of Maine. So if somebody asks you to notarize their will, one of the witnesses has to be a lawyer, unless you are a lawyer, and I don't know that you are. But I didn't want you to get tripped up between now and the time you actually became familiar with the order. So I wanted to point that out to you. But 1144, I think, is problematic the way it's written. I really didn't want to go through line by line in my testimony. If we want to do that at a work session, that's great. But I expect that this is one of the bills that's going to be wrapped up in this whole process of examination. So that's all I have to say. I think this is a wonderful enterprise, and I'll be more than happy to participate. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Delicata. And I did want to confirm a couple of things. It's my understanding that your organization is invited to participate in the work group. And then also we do have your written testimony on the bills, including 1144. So we'll be able to follow those hyperlinks. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Committee members, are there any questions for Mr. Delicata? Not seeing any. It's nice to see you this afternoon.
Thanks very much.
And then with that, I'll turn to the attendee space and ask if there's, excuse me, anybody who wishes to speak in opposition. Well, first of all, anybody else who wishes to speak in support of 904, 1144, or 1399. Those are the remote notarization bills. Please raise your electronic hand. Not seeing anyone. And then those who wish to speak in opposition, please raise your electronic hand. Again, not seeing anybody. And then anyone who would like to speak neither for nor against. And again, not seeing any electronic hands. And so with that, we will close the work session on 904, 1144, and 1399. And I think that concludes our work for the day, although I've been so focused on timing and our hearings that I could be wrong. Is there any other business that we need to take up today, committee members? Not seeing any. Thank you, everybody, very much. Do you need us for anything, Supi?
Please, yes. On the divided reports, the voting is different this year. And on divided reports, normally I would come to you and have you sign them. You are getting emails to ask if you're in agreement. I've been asked to ask you to please return those as soon as possible.
Thank you. And those are from LEO, the Legislative Information Office?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. So we'll be checking our inboxes for those. Anything else, committee members? Not seeing any. So do we have a motion to adjourn? So moved by Representative Newell. Have a really nice weekend, everybody. And Soupy and Peggy, thank you for all your hard work today as well. Well done today, everyone. Take care.